I never believed in the whole light at the end of the tunnel folly where people after experiencing near-death experiences would startle awake in a cold sweat exclaiming I saw the light, but here I am currently at this so-called tunnel facing a glaring light when the last thing I remember was sleeping in my room. Did I die? If so, how was I assassinated? I don't remember wronging anyone, but then again, being a powerful public figure gave others all sorts of reasons to want me dead anyway, since it didn't seem like I was going to wake up anytime soon. While I slowly gravitated towards this bright light, I might as well go along with it. The journey seemed to take an eternity. I half expected a choir of children to be singing an angelic beckoning me towards what I hoped would be heaven, instead my vision of everything around me turned into a blur of bright red as sounds assaulted my ears. When I tried to say something, the only sound that came out seemed to be a cry. The muffled voices became clearer, and I made out a "Congratulations, sir and madam, he's a healthy boy." Wait, I guess normally I should be thinking along the lines of shit, was I just born? Am I a baby now? But strangely, the only thought that seemed to pop up in my mind was, so the bright light at the end of the tunnel is the light coming through into the female vag. Haha, let's not think about it anymore. Assessing my situation in rational king-like manner, I noticed first of all that wherever this place was I understood the language. That's always a good sign. Next, after slowly and painfully opening my eyes, my retinas were bombarded with different colors and figures. It took a bit of time for my infant eyes to get used to the light. The doctor, or so it seemed, in front of me had a not-so-appealing face with long graying hair on both head and chin. I swear his glasses were thick enough to be bulletproof. The strange thing was he wasn't wearing a doctor's gown. Were we even in a hospital room? I seemed to have been born from some satanic summoning ritual, because this room was lit only by a couple of candles, and we were on the floor over a bed of straw. I looked around and saw the female who pushed me out of her tunnel. Calling her mother should be fair. Taking a few more seconds to see what she looked like, I'd have to admit she's a beauty, but that might have been caused by my half-blurry eyes. Rather than a glamorous beauty, I would better describe her as lovely in a very kind and gentle sense, with distinct auburn hair and brown eyes. I couldn't help but notice her long eyelashes and perky nose that made me want to just cling to her. She just permeated this motherly feel. Is this why babies were attracted to their mothers? I peeled my face away and turned right to barely make out the person who I assumed was my father by the idiotic grin and teary eyes he gazed at me with. Immediately he said, "Hi little Art, I'm your daddy. Can you say Dada?" I glanced around to see both my mother and the house doctor roll their eyes as my mother managed to scoff, "Honey, he was just born." I took a closer look at my father, and I can see why my lovely mother was attracted to him. Besides the few loose screws he seemed to have by expecting a newborn to articulate a two-syllable word, he was a very charismatic-looking man with a cleanly shaven square jawline that complemented his features. His hair, of very ashy brown color, seemed to be kept trim, while his eyebrows were strong and fierce, extending in a sword-like fashion meeting to a V shape, yet his eyes held a gentle quality, whether it was from the way his eyes drooped a bit at the end or from the deep blue, almost sapphire hue that radiated from his irises. He isn't crying, doctor. I thought newborns were supposed to cry when they are born. I heard my mother's voice by the time I finished checking. "Oh, you, I mean observing my parents." The wannabe doctor simply excused himself, saying, "There are cases where the infant does not cry. Please continue resting for a couple of days, Mrs. Lewin, and let me know if anything happens to Arthur." Mr. Lewin. The following couple of weeks after my journey out of the tunnel was a new kind of torture for me. I had little to no motor control over my limbs except being able to wave them around, and even that got tiring quickly. I realized all too grudgingly that babies don't really get to control their fingers all that much. I don't know how to break it to you guys, but when you place your finger on a baby's palm, they don't grab it because they like you, they grab it because it's like getting hit in the funny bone. It's a reflex. Forget motor control, I can't even excrete my wastes at my discretion. I was not yet the master of my own bladder. It just came out. On the bright side, one of the few perks that I became happily accustomed to was being breastfed by my mother. Don't get me wrong, I had no ulterior motives whatsoever. It's just that breast milk tasted a lot better than baby formula and has better nutritional value. Okay, please believe me, the satanic demon summoning place seemed to be my parents' room, and from what I figured, the place that I was currently stuck in was hopefully a place in my world from the past when electricity hadn't yet been invented. My mother quickly proved my hopes wrong, as one day she healed a scratch on my leg from when my idiotic father bumped me against a drawer while swinging me around. No, not like Band-Aid and a kiss heal, but a full-blown shining light with a faint hum from her freaking hands type of healing. Where the hell am I My mother named Alice Lewin, and my father named Reynolds Lewin at least seemed to be good people, hell if not the best. I suspected my mother was an angel because I've never met such a kind-hearted warm person. While being carried on her back by a baby cradle strap of some sort, I went with her to what she called a town. This town of Ashbur was more of a glorified outpost, seeing that there were no roads or buildings. We walked on the main dirt trail where there were tents on both sides with various merchants and salesmen selling all sorts of things from common everyday necessities to things I couldn't help but raise a brow at, like weapons, armor, and rocks, shining rocks. The strangest thing that I couldn't seem to get used to was the people carrying weapons like it was a luxury designer bag. I witnessed a man of around 170 centimeters carrying a gigantic war axe that was larger than him anyway. Mother kept talking to me, probably to try to get me to learn the language faster while shopping for the day's groceries, exchanging pleasantries with various people passing by or working in the booths. Meanwhile, my body turned against me once again, and I fell asleep. Damn this useless body sitting on the lap of my mother, who was caressing me in her bosom. I was intently focused on my dad, who was currently reciting a chant, which sounded like a prayer to the earth. For close to a good minute I leaned in closer and closer, almost falling off my human seat, while expecting some magical phenomenon like an earthquake splitting the ground or a giant stone golem emerging after what seemed like an eternity. 3 adult human-sized boulders emerged from the ground and slammed against a nearby tree. What in the name of that was it? I flailed my arms in anger, but my idiot father interpreted that into a wow, and had a big grin on his face, saying, "Your daddy is awesome, huh?" No, my father was a much better fighter when he put on his 2 iron gauntlets. Even I felt compelled to drop my underwear for him with quick and firm movements that were surprising for his build. His fists carried enough force to break the sound barrier, but were fluid enough to not leave an opening. In my world he would have been classed as a high-tier fighter leading a squad of soldiers, but to me he was my idiot father. For what I learned, this world seemed to be a fairly straightforward one, filled with magic and warriors where power and wealth decided one's rank in society. In that sense it wasn't too different from my old world, except for the lack of technology and the slight difference between magic and ki. In my old world, wars had become an almost obsolete form of settling disputes between countries. Don't get me wrong. Of course, there were still smaller-scale battles and armies were still needed for the safety of the citizens. However, disputes concerning the well-being of a country were based on either a duel between the rulers of their country limited to making use of ki and close combat weapons, or a mock battle between platoons where limited firearms were allowed for smaller disputes. Therefore, kings weren't the typical fat man sitting on the throne ignorantly commanding others, but had to be the strongest fighter to represent his or her country. Enough about that, though. The currency in this new world seemed pretty straightforward from the exchanges my mother had with the merchants. Copper was the lowest form of currency, then silver, followed by gold. While I had yet to see anything costing as much as a gold coin, normal families seemed to be able to live off of a couple copper coins a day just fine. 100 copper, 1 silver, 100 silver, 1 gold every day involved honing my new body, mastering the motor functions residing deep within me. That comfortable regimen soon changed. I was a king. I could have my country's army assemble at my feet. Kneeling down with the snap of a finger, I've outdueled my competitors from different countries as well as my own people to settle disputes and maintain my position in terms of swordsmanship and controlling ki. I was second to none, for having personal strength was essential to becoming a ruler. In my past world on Earth, kings weren't born but raised, yet I couldn't think of a prouder moment in my 2 lives than now. I can crawl, baby. Till now I had to make do with the stories mother would tell me while trying to make me fall asleep. I grumbled out noises of complaint when she stopped too early. My father would sometimes sit me on his lap while idly talking to me about his old days, which gave me some hints as to what kind of world this was and what it was filled with. Reynolds Lewin, former adventurer, had quite a lot of experience in this field. He was a part of several parties that went on expeditions to search for treasure and fulfill missions they acquired from the Adventurer Guild. He eventually settled down when he met my mother at the kingdom's border in a city called Valden. He proudly told me how my mother fell head over heels for him at first sight when he visited the town's Adventurer Guild Hall that she had been working at that time, but I suspected it was the exact opposite from how my mother slapped him across the back of the head and told him to stop telling me lies. My name was Arthur Lewin now, by the way, Art for short, which as a former king sounded a little too cute, but hey, after getting a glimpse of myself in the metal sheet they used as a mirror in the washroom, I looked absolutely adorable. I got my mother's glowing auburn hair while my eyes were a bright azure color inherited from my father. I don't know how my facial features are going to turn out as I mature, but as long as I don't turn out fat, it'll be okay. Watch out, future ladies, prepare to be heartbroken after weeks of attempting to crawl yet only achieving an uncoordinated scuffle. In place, I had finally succeeded, even managing to sneak into the family's library study room while my mother was hanging the laundry out to dry. Mother rued the day I started to become mobile, sighing, I swear you're going to become as hard to manage as your father. I closed the encyclopedia and situated myself more comfortably on the ground. Basically, I just laid on my belly because crawling and sitting upright was so damn tiring. Pondering over what I had just read, this world seemed pretty underdeveloped. From what I could infer, there didn't seem to be much technological advancement. The only source of transportation appeared to be horse-driven carriages that varied in size for overland use and ships with sails for rivers. Weapons were freely allowed and not really regulated unless you were visiting the royal family or people that held authority. For God's sake, it continues to baffle me every time I see people carrying weapons while shopping for groceries. Sure, in my previous world Earth, there were soldiers and guards who carried concealed weapons despite that they weren't for the purpose of killing but to deter crimes from happening here, though I witnessed a thief who stole a couple of items from the armory store the other day get slashed in the back by a large, bald mercenary carrying a polearm. Moreover, the bystanders even went as far as to applaud that oversized monk as the thief laid there dying. A similarity that both this world and my previous world shared was the system of monarchy. The continent of Dicathan had kingdoms, each ruled by a king and his royal family. Unlike Earth, though, the king was chosen based on lineage, the title passed down from the son of the king to his son, and so on. After scanning through the encyclopedia, there didn't seem to be much information on other continents. Besides the one we were currently in, I found this a bit odd since there were ships that carried goods and passengers across the continent by river. I just assumed that maybe the technology on ships haven't been developed enough to sail across oceans. One thing that was going to be hard to get used to was the whole premise of magic in this world. If we were talking about superhuman powers, sure, the countries on Earth relied on such people on Earth. Practitioners learned how to condense and utilize the innate ki that they had in their body. Think of it as a muscle. If you were repeatedly breaking the ki center down through exhaustion followed by rest would cause the ki center to grow stronger, allowing access to a bigger pool of ki. The ki would then be channeled throughout the body via special veins or meridians and utilized for the strengthening of the body and weapon. In this world, instead of ki, it seemed to be called mana, and the more surprising thing was that it existed in the atmosphere. Thus, practitioners or mages would use the surrounding mana and draw it into their bodies, ultimately condensing it in their mana core. In my old world, ki only existed and formed inside the body. Whether ki had never existed in Earth's atmosphere in the first place or ceased to exist because of the pollution caused by humans, we never know on Earth. While practice was incredibly important, the size of a user's innate ki center was even more important because the limited amount of ki one had in his body was all one could work with. Did that mean that one's innate mana core size wouldn't matter as much because of the available mana in the atmosphere? The bigger the cup, the more you can hold. Right, in my old world, even though my ki center wasn't that large, I was considered a prodigy at channeling and utilizing my ki effectively to make up for my not so sufficiently large ki center. With the way I utilized every bit of my ki, I was able to become the strongest of the elite division of duelists, earning the right to become king. Now, if I could still practice the way ki practitioners used their ki, but with mana that was both present inside the mana core and in the surrounding atmosphere, couldn't I essentially double, no triple the strength that I had before? The next book that I managed to pull from the bottom shelf explained a couple of questions for me. Beginner's Guide for the Privileged Mage. While the power to control mana is largely genetic, there are many cases where children of magi come out unable to sense the mana around them. A recent census showed that roughly 1 in 100 children are able to sense mana, but the extent of which could only be tested when their mana core first completely developed, anywhere from their early adolescence to late teen years. It will be apparent when a mage first awakens by the initial repellence of the surrounding mana. When their mana core manifests, this results in a translucent barrier forming around the awakened that lasts a couple of minutes. Flipping through the pages, I found something that caught my attention. Mana can be used in a couple of ways. The two most common methods of utilizing mana are enhancement of the body with mana augmenter and emission of mana to the outside world. Conjurer augmenters are most commonly seen amongst warriors who utilize mana, channeling it through their body to strengthen themselves and their attacks. The practice of conjuring is seen in mages, who after utilizing their mana can cast spells to give off a certain effect on the surrounding area or directly at a target. Weaknesses and limitations. While augmenters can possess incredible strength, defense, and agility, their weakness lies in their limited range. Conjurers possess unfathomable powers, being able to bend their surroundings to their will. However, such powers come with limits. Unlike augmenters who utilize most of the mana in their own mana cores, conjurers need to borrow mana from the outside world in addition to their own mana core to exert mana into their surroundings in the form of a spell, while both types of mages or mana manipulators, for the more scientifically accurate term, depend on and are categorized by their mana core. Augmenters and conjurers also have different ways of measuring their aptitude. An augmenter's prowess or talent is measured by the strength of the mana channels in their body, which measures the speed and efficiency in relocating their mana from their mana core into various parts of their bodies. A conjurer's power and talent comparatively is measured by the power of their mana veins, which indicates the speed and effectiveness of absorbing mana from the outside world to cast a spell. Mages, mana manipulators, are typically categorized into one of these two divisions, since attempting to be proficient in both from an early stage is incredibly time-consuming and inefficient. Most are born with a skewed difference in their mana channels and mana veins. Augmenters do not need very strong mana veins because they mostly utilize the mana from their cores, while conjurers do not need very powerful mana channels because they do not release their mana into their own bodies. As proficiency level rises, the distinction between augmenters and conjurers lessens naturally, but that is only so at an advanced level. So my idiot father seems to be a decently competent augmenter, and a less than average conjurer. That healing light, though, what was my mother? There are a few rare deviants. The two most well-known types of deviants are elemental deviants and emitters, while there are still some undiscovered ones that are highly sought after. Are the emitters, more commonly known as healers, possess the rare ability to cast their unique restorative mana unto others directly, recovering injuries and impairments, while mother is the best. Fundamentals of conjuring. The proper steps of utilizing mana for conjurers is to gather the surrounding mana in the area, drawing it into your body, then, after circulating it into your mana core to stabilize and purify the atmosphere's diluted mana, you channel it into an appropriate conductor with the incantations as a mental controller for your will into shaping the mana into whatever spell you want. The more powerful the spell, the longer it will take to draw in surrounding mana. Store it in your mana core where it is condensed and purified, and finally channel and release. Because conjuring involves exerting focused mana into a particular spell, conjurers will notice that they have a special aptitude of certain elements: air, water, fire, earth, but with proper training can become adequate in the basics of all elements. Fundamentals of augmenting. Unlike conjuring, much less time can be spent gathering the surrounding mana. Efficient use of augmenting requires speed and precision in the use of the mana from your core and less from the mana in the atmosphere. This was where it clicked. Augmenting was very close to using key, except you could also draw mana in from your surroundings. The reason why there weren't any kinds of conjurers in my old world of Earth was because there was no mana in the atmosphere to draw from and create a phenomenon. My gaze tensed as I read on. Augmenting requires proper distribution of mana into different parts of the body, depending on how the user sees fit. While it seems simple at a glance, augmenting requires much insight into the individual's own body. Being able to utilize the mana channels efficiently requires years of both mental and physical practice, because augmenting involves extracting mana in its purest form from the user's mana core. There are no highly notable distinctions in an elemental sense at an early stage. However, augmenters are able to control their mana more freely, resulting in vastly different forms of fighting through augmentation. The phenomenon called backlash occurs in both types of practitioners. For augmenters, it occurs from depletion of the mana core, causing extreme bodily pain depending on how strenuous the damage to the mana core is. For conjurers, backlash occurs from overfilling of the mana core. This is caused by overuse of spells beyond the practitioner's capacity, or using a spell too powerful for his or her mana core to handle. Closing the book, I propped myself up on my butt, digesting the overload of information that I had just read because of the uncanny similarities between the key center from my old world and the mana core in this world. I found it hard to believe that you needed to be a young adolescent to manipulate mana. In my old world, children could already meditate and sense the key scattered inside their bodies. Once the key migrated into a single place, the key center would form. Testing my hypothesis, I began meditating, trying to sense the mana in my 7-month-old body. When there you are, Art honey. Are you having trouble taking a poopy? Mother, I'm about to begin my journey to become the greatest mage in the world. Do not make me out to be a constipated infant picking me up, and gently placing me in her arms I was forcibly taken away to have my diaper changed, which surprisingly was full by the time I noticed. Arthur had to be the most adorable baby. And I'm not saying this because I'm a doting mother. Know him, and his scruffy little patch of glowing auburn hair and playful eyes that almost radiate blue light, while his gaze at times seemed almost intelligent. No, I told you I'm not a doting mother. I plan to be a strict and just mother. I can't rely on my husband to teach little Art any common sense. For God's sake, he tried to teach my baby how to fight when he could barely crawl. I know this little rascal would turn out just like his father if I left him be. As soon as he started crawling, I was so proud I was on the verge of shedding tears. But I didn't know how much of a handful he'd be as soon as he became mobile. I swear there's not a single moment where I can take my eyes off of him before he crawls into the study room. How weird. We made sure to buy him lots of stuffed animals and wooden toys to play with, but he always ends up going to the study room that at least was directly opposite of his father. Seeing how Reynolds almost gravitates away from text longer than the weekly newspaper, looking at how excited he got when we went out to town, I decided to go shopping for food once every other day instead of twice a week. No, I told you I'm not a doting mother. This is for his education of the outside world and for fresh food in the house. Yeah, haha, that's it. My son seemed to be interested in a lot of things. I can't get enough of seeing his head. That seemed so disproportional to his little body, turning left and right while trying to take everything around him in. He seemed particularly intrigued by his father's practices. Reynolds was a pretty competent adventurer back in the days. Being a B-class adventurer by the age of 28 was actually a pretty fast climb. Acquiring an E-class rank, the lowest rank, required taking a test to prevent us from sending eager but ignorant adolescents to their deaths. As for the higher ranks, I've only seen a couple of A-class adventurers in my years of working there, and I've yet to see an S-class adventurer, assuming they actually exist, working at the Adventurer Guild, or what we just called the Guild Hall back then in Walden. I got to see too many eager teens. I swear I was surprised they didn't float away from having their overly inflated egos get to their heads. At least they were ambitious. One time I was assigned to proctor a basic practical exam where the examinee had to simply demonstrate fundamental competency in their mana manipulation, but before the test had even begun the kid fell straight onto his back because the sword he was carrying had been too heavy for him. Talking about airheads, Reynolds sure came off as one back then. The moment he saw me in the guild hall, his jaw literally dropped, and he just stood there until the guy in line behind him elbowed him to hurry up. He hurriedly wiped away his drool and managed to mumble a "Hi, can I trade in the stuff for the mission?" I just giggled as he turned beet red from embarrassment. He managed to gather up the courage to ask me out for dinner, and we just hit it off from there. Even now I can't help but smile when I see his droopy blue puppy eyes looking at me. Art somehow wound up with both of our redeeming traits, making him that much more adorable. You should see him when I have to change his diapers. I don't know why, but he would start turning red in his cheeks and cover his face with his tiny little fingers. Could babies his age even get embarrassed? The next landmark that made it to my baby journal, which is purely for educational purposes by the way, and not because I am a doting mother, was when he first said mama. He said mama. I told him to say mama again and again just to make sure I didn't hear wrong. Reynolds sulked for the entire day because Art said mama before dad. Haha, I won. The rest of the year went by pleasantly with my son sticking by me wherever I went and frequently looking out the window to see his father practice. After dinner, I'm glad Reynolds gave up being an adventurer and instead took up a post as a guard nearby for our town. Being an adventurer may have brought in more money, but not knowing when or if my husband would come home was not worth any amount of extra money. More so after that incident, to our relief. Little Art never got sick, but oftentimes I would find him sitting still on his butt while closing his eyes. At first I thought he was having trouble relieving himself, but after checking the first couple of times that didn't seem to be the case. How strange. I didn't know what to make of it. I thought babies his age were supposed to be energetic and flighty, but after his episodes of escaping to the study room he seemed to spend a lot of time sitting still, almost meditating. I was worried at first, but although it would happen a couple times a day, it only lasts for a couple of minutes, and Art would seem strangely happy afterwards. The way he holds his arms up and looks up at me makes me just want to gobble him up. Ahem, not a doting mother. About 2 years have passed since I made my difficult journey to the study room. From then I had been constantly trying to gather the little bits of mana spread out in my body and focus it in an attempt to form a mana core. Let me tell you, it was a slow and arduous task, I would find myself having an easier time trying to learn how to walk on my hands and eat with my feet in this damnable body than trying to will my mana core to condense. I could see why the book said that it'll take until at least the adolescent age for a person to awaken. If I had let the mana particles in my body move by themselves, it would take at least a decade for them to gravitate towards each other to form anything remotely close to a mana core. Instead, a perk in having the mental capacity of an adult meant that I had the cognitive ability to consciously will my mana particles together. This was something I did as a child in my past life in school, where they taught you from childhood to learn how to control ki. Essentially, it's being able to sense the ki or mana now in your own body and force them together near the solar plexus. If left alone, the particles will eventually slowly float towards each other anyway, but I'm just grabbing the feathers and shoving them into the twill sack instead of waiting for them to float down by themselves, figuratively speaking, of course. Daily rituals consisted of me trying to spend as much of my limited energy as possible on gathering my mana while avoiding suspicion from my mother and father. My father seemed to think that throwing a child into the air would be quite enjoyable, while I understand there would be a kind of adrenaline effect that may excite some people when mana was used to reinforce his arms and I got thrown into the air like a high-speed projectile. The only feeling I had was nausea and a traumatic fear of heights. Fortunately, my mother had a pretty firm handle on my father, but my mother scared me sometimes. I often caught her staring at me, half drooling, looking at me like I'm some kind of premium meat. I tried to adapt to my body by only talking in very simple sentences. After I first said mama to let her know I wanted more food, she almost burst into tears of joy. It's been a long time since I received this sort of motherly affection. Since then, I limited myself to just trying to talk enough to get the point across, no grammar necessary. Besides that, the pace of my training was strenuous and slow, but I was getting a pretty big head start compared to everybody else, so I wasn't complaining. These past 2 years have not gone to waste, for I finally gathered all of my mana into my solar plexus, and was in the midst of condensing a mana core when boom! My baby boy. I was so happy we had a son. I wonder, when can babies start training? When did I start training again? Man, I can't wait to teach my baby boy all about magic. I hope he turns out to be an augmenter like his old pops. I may know the basics of conjuring, but I can't do anything practical with it except use it as a form of mental exercise. Alice, on the other hand, is one of the most talented people I've ever seen. Even as an emitter, she's exceptional. Back then, after she agreed to date me, she joined my party, and we went on missions together. Her restorative powers were amazing in and of itself, but what shocked me the most was when she used an area of effect spell which healed all allies inside. Talk about one of a kind. And I'm her husband, hee. I still don't get tired of saying that. Back in the good old days before we had to settle down, we would go into beast glades and hunt for mana beasts. Mana beasts were various unique animals and creatures born with the ability to absorb mana into their bodies and create their own mana core, which we call beast cores. Beast cores had an unlimited amount of uses, making them very valuable and highly sought after. Of course, the higher the classes of beast cores, the more valuable they would be. Mana beasts were classified anywhere from E-class to your SS class monster. I can't tell you much about those simply because I've never seen nor heard of one, but supposedly they do exist. Rule of thumb: you should always assume that mana beasts are stronger than humans of the same class, simply because even if we take mana out of the equation, a beast's physical body was much stronger than the average humans. While the beast glades were dangerous as long as you were cautious and didn't get lost, it was pretty easy to keep yourself out of trouble. The stronger beasts tended to be deeper in dungeon-like underground caves or nearer to the core of the glades. The first few tens of kilometers around the perimeter of the beast glades were pretty well mapped, and as long as you were at least a C-class adventurer, you'd be fine. Once in a while there would be missions posted up that required a couple parties of adventurers. Those were usually for trying to clear and map the harder dungeons that weren't fully explored. If a mana beast had the power to create its own lair and have other mana beasts serving him, then you could bet there were treasures to be gained. I tell my son Art all about this life, telling him this and much more so I can nudge him to at least gain some experience as an adventurer when he gets older. I don't know what I'll do if little Art never awakens. Oh God, it doesn't matter how long it takes, as long as he can train to become any kind of mage. I'll be a proud and happy father. It's pretty easy to tell what type of mage someone will be when they awaken, because when augmenters, conjurers, and deviants form a translucent barrier, the mana behaves differently around them during that time. Augmenters, when they first awaken, form a sort of repelling force around the barrier, signifying that they have dominant mana channels in their body. Conjurers, on the other hand, form a vacuum of mana around them, which means that their mana veins are much more dominant. Of course, the degrees of the pushing force and vacuuming force depends on their talent in either category. I don't mean to brag, but when I first awakened at the early age of 12, by the way, I was sleeping and the pushing force made me levitate for a good couple of minutes, enough force to lift a human body. If it wasn't for that time, I'm sure we wouldn't have settled down this fast. Anyways, as soon as he awakens, I'm going to train him. If he ends up becoming a conjurer, I think I can get him a tutor from the main town. Since Alice and I aren't adept enough to be teaching him, is what I said. But boom, currently 3/4 of the house is gone. What happened? Luckily I was with Alice in the front yard for a bit after dinner, but little Art was still in the house. Arthur, Alice's face drained of all blood as I saw her go pale, eyes wide in disbelief and worry. I nudged my wife down, while covering her with a temporary shield that would last for a few minutes. I rushed towards the direction of the explosion, shielding my body with a layer of mana over my skin. The debris was constantly thrown towards me as I reached deeper into the source of the explosion. After fighting my way through the scraps of what was left of my house and several pieces of rocks, I saw it. My son had the all but noticeable translucent barrier flickering around him. Better yet, the repulsion of his awakened powers was what caused this explosion. He was floating in the center of a crater that cleared 3/4 of our house as well as our entire backyard. Haha, my legs gave out, and I just landed on my knees while my jaw hung loose. My son was almost 3 years old when he awakened, only 3. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Reynolds, honey, I glanced back at my wife with my mouth still agape from shock. She managed to slowly make her way towards me after the remains of the explosion settled and there was no more danger. She was making half steps towards me, covering her face with her arms to shield what she could from the strong pushing force still emanating out of Art. Reynolds, what happened? What's going on? Where's Art? Still unable to find the strength to speak, I simply pointed towards the direction of our son. While confused, she looked at the direction I was pointing at, and all she could manage to whisper was, "Oh my wow, I feel great." Feeling refreshed at my breakthrough, I closed my eyes to sense my newly formed mana core, my sweet little mana core. Art, oh my baby, are you okay? I spotted my mother rushing towards me while my father was on the ground kneeling. What did he do this time that caused him to get punished by mother? My mother lifted me up and hugged me almost to the point where my underdeveloped ribs gave out. I managed to squeal out a "Mom, no!" cry. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer me and continued sobbing while cradling me. My father arrived next to her, patting her back and patting my head as well, giving me a weak smile. After a brief moment of confusion, I peeled my head away from my mother's bosom and I looked around to see that we were standing in the center of a giant crater, with most of our house gone. What the fuck? Who did this? Who had the audacity to destroy the home of a king? The perpetrators will rue this day. I will hunt them down day and night, and not rest until. Congrats, Art, honey, you awakened, champ. I did this. In my old world on Earth, a similar phenomenon happened. When a youth awakened, a clear barrier appeared around the awakened, and a small pushing force would surround the barrier. I'm guessing, though, that the repelling force in this world was lots stronger because of the mana in the atmosphere, something that wasn't present back on Earth. As once a king of integrity, I decided on apologizing for this situation. "I'm sorry, Mom, Dad, am I in trouble?" Haha. "No, Art, honey, you're not in trouble. We were just worried about you. I'm glad you're alright." My mother managed to chuckle through half-teary eyes. My idiot father, on the hand, was a lot more excited. "My boy is a genius, awakened at the age of less than 3. This is unprecedented." I thought I was fast, but geez. So a couple of moments of a picture-perfect atmosphere was broken when a neighbor passing by screamed, "What in the world?" "Haha, we better clean this mess up," my father said as he grinned, rubbing the back of his head. A couple of weeks had passed since then. We decided to keep my awakening a secret for now. My father managed to contact a couple of his past adventurer party members to help rebuild the decimated part of our house while we stayed in the nearby inn, with conjurers raising the ground for the foundation and augmenters doing the grunt work. The house didn't take too long to finish. The beauty of magic. Surprisingly, none of my father's ex-party members seemed to question why our house blew up. That seemed to say a lot about my idiot father. During the middle of reconstructing our house, my birthday came around, May 29th. My parents woke me up that morning with a present, and what seemed to be a loaf of bread in their hands. It was a cake. Would have been easier to tell if it wasn't black. Opening the present box to find a carefully carved wooden sword, I hugged both my parents, thanking them for the present and the cake. This surprised me because my parents hadn't bothered celebrating my past 2 birthdays, so I assumed this world didn't really celebrate such an occasion. I later found out that birthdays are celebrated starting at the age of 3 because of a tradition from a long time ago, when babies were more susceptible to death before the age of 3. How medieval. Another thing I took an interest in noticing, seeing children as well as teens working on farms with their family, and on forges as apprentice blacksmiths, made me realize there was no mandatory form of a structured education system. Any sort of rudimentary education was provided by their families. As soon as I turned 3, my mother began giving me lessons for a set time, teaching me how to read and write. Playing the role of a genius son, I pretended to learn quickly to her delight so I could read harder books in the library without drawing suspicion. These last couple of weeks passed by in a flash. After awakening, my father taught me the basics of mana manipulation, and how to start training in it as best as he could. He tried to simplify it as much as possible so that a toddler could understand, I guess. But if it weren't for my adult-level comprehensive abilities, I don't think I would have retained much. The basics are as follows. An easy way to know: measure your strength lies in the color of your mana core. Starting off, the mana core would be black due to the body's blood and other impurities mixing with the mana particles as they formed into a mana core. As the mana inside the person's body becomes purer and the impurities get filtered out over time, it'll change into a dark red color. From there, the color of the mana core would get lighter, from dark red to a red and then to a lighter red. The order goes as follows: black, red, orange, yellow, silver, and then white. From the red mana core until the yellow mana core, the colors split into 3 shades: dark orange, solid orange, light orange. Rule of thumb: the lighter the mana core's color, the purer one's mana core was and the more power they would have access to. While the lessons with my father proved useful, I was getting impatient at the pace we were moving at. I asked Mother a couple days later, "Mom, can I get books on magic?" Since my mother still had some connections in the guild hall, she managed to acquire a pretty wide collection of books on basic mana manipulation as well as fighting with different weapons. Some of them were just books with only simple words and mostly pictures of the basics on how mana was condensed, but I ignored those. My mother gave me a strange look because the books that I'd been looking at were on a higher level. She assumed I wouldn't even be able to understand most of the words in there, and tried to cajole me into reading some of the simpler books, saying that it would be easier to understand, but eventually she relented. A typical day would involve taking reading and writing lessons from Mother, and augmenting training with my father. After he covered the basic theory and application of augmenting, we started physical training. Seeing how my body was too small to start sparring, we opted with running and body workouts. I think seeing my 3-year-old body trying to do a push-up would be the funniest thing, but my father did a good job holding in his laughter. When I'm not taking either of these lessons, I usually stayed cooped up in the newly improved library, reading and meditating to further condense and purify my mana core. As the year passed by with not much happening outside of my typical schedule, my father spoke up while we were having dinner one night. "Honey, I think it's time we get our proper mentor." A clang drowned out the silence, as my mother dropped her fork onto her plate. "What, Reynolds? Arthur isn't even 4 yet." "No, besides, you said if our son was an augmenter you'd be able to teach him." Mother spoke with evident desperation. "I also never expected our son to be this much of a prodigy in mana manipulation." "Who has ever heard of an awakening at the age of 3? Father responded a lot more calmly. "But that means he'll have to leave home. He's only 4. Reynolds, we can't have our baby leave home at such an early age." "You don't get it." When I observed his body while he meditated, I couldn't help but feel that all of this was natural to him. "Alice, honey, I'm holding my son back by trying to teach him something he can do in his sleep." Thus began my parents' quarrel. They went back and forth, basically repeating their initial points. Mother kept saying that I was too young, father saying that they couldn't hold me back from reaching my full potential, blah blah. In the meantime, I was playing a game of war with my food. The peas attacked for the mother empire, while the carrots of the father nation desperately defended their land. Finally my parents settled down, and my father turned to me. "Art, this is concerning you, so you have a say in this as well. How would you feel about going to a big city and having a teacher?" Fantastic. I applauded the effort for trying to make this fair, but I don't think he realized that he was trying to ask a 4-year-old to make a decision that would ultimately change his life. Trying to conclude this little argument, I suggested, "Can I at least try meeting some mentors and have them see if I need to be tutored or not?" Silence. Did I step on a landmine? Was I not supposed to be this articulate in my sentences at my current age? Are they mad because I didn't choose a side? Having no confidence in keeping a poker face, I looked down, and waited for their response. Thankfully none of my fears were on their minds. My mother finally spoke quietly. She muttered, "We'll at least formally have his mana core and channels tested. We can figure out what to do from there." As my father nodded in agreement, we began making preparations. The next day, when I said what I did last night, I assumed that we'd be going to a nearby town, or a city maximum, a day's worth of travel away, to have me tested by a qualified mage, but boy was I wrong. We were making preparations for a 3-week-long journey, a journey via horse-drawn carriage through the Grand Mountains to something called a teleportation gate, which will get us into a city called Xyrus. A book that I had read popped into my mind. I recalled reading about a floating piece of land built by an ancient organization of conjurers, for the sole purpose of housing the most prestigious mage academy. A city was later built around the academy. Both the city and the academy were named after the leader of the organization, Xyrus. How was it possible to keep a piece of land hundreds of kilometers long afloat? Magnetism. Then the land beneath the city would be affected by it. Did the city have its own gravitational field? Anyway, this journey was going to be long. It's times like these that I wish modern transportation existed. In order to get to the city, we'd have to enter through one of the designated teleportation gates in the Grand Mountains. Otherwise it would easily take months to travel across towns to reach the gate below the actual city, which floated near the border of the kingdom of Sapin and Darv. One reason why my father pushed for us to go on this journey now was because his ex-party members had recently stopped by and were on their way to the city of Xyrus. Going now with them meant that we would have 3 augmenters and 2 conjurers, along with my mother, who was a rare emitter, and my father, a B-class augmenter. While the mountain range didn't have any mana beasts, there were still the potential dangers of bandits and wild animals. While my mother and father took care of packing all of the necessities, I packed my wooden sword and 2 books for the journey. By mid-morning we were ready to head out. After tying my knapsack containing my books and a couple of snacks to my back and strapping my wooden sword to my waist, I grasped my mother's hand and followed my parents to meet their ex-party members. Although I'd heard about them occasionally from father, I never visited home while they were rebuilding it, so it would be my first time meeting them. The information I learned from my father about the party members of Twin Horns consisted of the following: Helen Shard, female augmenter specializing in magic archery; Adam Crench, male augmenter whose main weapon was the spear; Jasmine Flamesworth, female augmenter who specialized in speed with dual daggers; Angela Rose, female conjurer specializing in wind magic; Durden Walker, male conjurer specializing in earth magic. We reached the inn they were staying at in Ashbur, and saw them out in front near the stables. My father, after hugging his ex-party members, exclaimed, "Fellas, I want you guys to meet my son Arthur. Go on, Art, introduce yourself." Giving a slight half bow while looking up at them, I introduced myself. "Hello, my father has told me great things about his fellow Twin Horns members. Thank you for traveling with us to Xyrus. We'll be in your hands." "Ha ha ha, what is this? Such manners. Are you sure he's your son?" Ray, the one to respond, was the spear wielder. Adam, taking a closer look at him, he seemed like the energetic, talkative type. While fairly good-looking, he had bright red hair tied in a messy poof at the end, almost like a flame, and a couple of bangs escaping from the hair tie. He reminded me of some sort of vagabond. His eyes were bright, and almost seemed like they were always laughing. The first thing I noticed, though, was the scar across his nose reaching both cheeks. I felt myself getting picked up. "Aw, isn't he just too precious? You should be glad that he doesn't look like you." Reynolds, peeling my face away from what felt like a memory foam death trap before she suffocated me in those gigantic breasts. I took a good look at the woman who was trying to kill me. Boy, was she pretty. I mean, while not as pretty as my mother, she gave off the whole royal princess vibe, with her long blonde hair that came to a curl at the ends and radiant green eyes that drooped slightly just as my hands were about to give out and my face about to enter the twin abyssal hills. A strong pair of hands grabbed me by the knapsack strapped to my back, whisking me away from the well-endowed woman. "Angela, you're hurting him." A deep voice grunted. There I hung like a kitten being carried by his mother by the scruff of his neck, unable to move. My eyes stayed fixedly on the giant. Easily passing 2 meters in height with a staff strapped to his back, the giant carefully lowered me back onto the ground and tidied my clothes gently. How genteel! I imaged riding on his shoulders like a mighty steed the whole way. I looked up at him, my eyes getting bigger. As I pondered, he had very narrow eyes and eyebrows that slanted down, giving him an almost innocent face compared to his enormous body that stretched past 2 meters. The short, scruffy, black hair on his head completed the shaggy dog image on him. Dusting my clothes off, I turned to face the woman that looked slightly younger than everyone else. Straight black hair that was half-tied at the back with a ribbon complementing her red half-open eyes and curt-looking lips making her seem very brusque. She slightly nods and then turns away. A woman, a few words. How charming. My eyes fixed on her. As she walked away towards the stable, I spotted 2 short daggers strapped to her lower back just above the hips. The last member of the Twin Horns was Helen Shard. She patted my head lightly and flashed a charming smile at me. The word that I would use to describe Miss Helen would be sharp eyes, sharp perky nose, thin red lips, and a flat chest, almost boyish with her shoulder-length hair tied tightly at the back. I can't help but be charmed by her charismatic ambience. She seemed to exude this "we can do anything if we believe" atmosphere from her pores that made her practically glow. Clothed in light leather armor covering her breasts, with her bow and quiver strapped to her back, I couldn't help but compare her to an elf, but quickly abandoned that thought after I seeing her rounded ears. I hopped onto the carriage furthest back with the help of a little mana, reinforcing my legs. Lately I'd gotten the hang of using my mana to reinforce my body. I had yet to fully test what I was capable of for fear of giving my parents a heart attack by showing off too much, but it was getting a bit more natural to direct my mana from my core through my mana channels. After our party finished loading in all of our travel necessities into the 2 carriages we were taking, we strapped in what I thought would be horses. It turned out this world had domesticated mana beasts, called skitters, for transportation. These giant lizards with spikes across their backs and powerful claws were D-class monsters that were a lot more efficient to use, albeit more expensive than horses when traveling mountain terrain. Let the journey begin. By nightfall the once distant mountain range seemed to have doubled in size. I wondered how big the Grand Mountain Range would be when we reached the foot. Needless to say, I was excited to get out of the tiny outpost that was my hometown Ashbur. We eventually stopped to set up camp near a small cluster of boulders. It was a good spot, with the rocks blocking off nearly all of the wind and lot of scrap wood from fallen branches to use as campfire. The one thing I detested the most about this body was how much sleep I required. Despite being asleep for most of the way, I still felt a bit heavy-eyed after being awake for a mere few hours. After setting up a couple of tents around the fire, my father and mother had begun conversing with the Twin Horns about old times, when Helen sat down next to me and said nonchalantly, "I heard your Pops say that you're some kind of genius mage. Is it true you've already awakened?" Not knowing how to respond, I just replied with the truth. She began asking me how I felt when I had awakened, and what color my mana core currently was. By this time a couple of curious ears perked up as Adam asked, "Hey Reynolds, do you mind if I test little art?" If I could have interjected, I might have said something along the lines of maybe mock fighting with someone my age isn't a great idea, since a normal 3-year old's greatest accomplishments at this point would be successfully going up and down stairs with alternating feet, walking in a circle, and if he was really coordinated, balancing on one foot for several seconds. But I guess these thoughts had never occurred to anyone here. Both my father and mother seemed at least a bit hesitant at first, but trusting their old comrade, my father just replied, "All right, but be careful. I haven't had the chance to teach him how to properly fight yet. We've just been doing light strength and mana exercises till now." Adam got up from his makeshift log seat and looked around until he found a short stick he felt satisfied with. "Come here, kid, haha, let's see what you're made of." I didn't know if his goal was to beat some sense into the kid he assumed had gotten an inflated ego since he heard I was some sort of genius, or if he was genuinely trying to gauge my strength, but by the smug grin he had on his face while looking down at me, I assumed it might have been for the former reason, retrieving the wooden sword I received as a present from my parents. I walked to the edge of the camp where Adam was waiting near a small clearing. "You know how to reinforce your weapon, right?" "Genius?" he asked, emphasizing the last word. By this time my father already sensed that Adam was just trying to put on a show of dominance into his little boy, but he just watched, knowing he wouldn't hurt me too much. "Many thanks, dear father." My mother looked a bit more anxious, as she kept glancing back and forth between me, Adam, and my father, keeping a firm hold onto her husband's sleeve. Well, at least mother was here to heal me if I got hurt. Right, I focused my gaze on Adam, who was just around 5 meters away from me. Images of my past life dueling other kings with my country and loved ones at stake popped up into my head. My eyes narrowed, restricting my vision to only the man in front of me. He was the opponent now. I willed mana into my legs and dashed forward with both my hands gripping the wooden sword to my right, his smug look still present. Adam prepared to block my horizontal swing when I feinted and used the special footwork I developed in my old world that I used for dueling. Almost Instantly I blinked a foot diagonally to his right. Curse this body, I couldn't perfectly execute the skill because of the height and weight difference compared to my old body. I wasn't used to this 40-pound 110c body. While I didn't reach the area I was aiming for, unfortunately for Adam, he already prepared his wooden stick to block my swing from the other direction, so his right side was unprotected. His smug look all but vanished, and was replaced by a look of surprise, with his eyes opening wide as he realized what was about to happen. Swinging my wooden sword to his open ribcage, I reinforced my wooden sword with mana at the last moment to conserve my mana, because I knew I was definitely at a disadvantage against a veteran like him. The look of surprise on Adam lasted a split second before he pivoted his right foot with almost inhuman speed. I squatted in time to dodge his upward swing and switched my stance from a thrust to a spinning swipe and landed a blow on his left ankle using all my momentum. His ankle gave out at that moment, throwing Adam off balance, or so I thought. He actually did a full-on split followed by a roundhouse sweep with his legs as soon as he was on the ground. This body won't be able to take a hit like that, so I jumped up to dodge his legs when from my peripheral view I saw the flash of brown from his wooden stick. With no time to use the blade to block the swing, I thrust the pommel of my sword, timing it so Adam's wooden stick and the end of my handle would clash. Newton's third law of motion suddenly came into mind. For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, and boy was the opposite reaction painful. While I did block the blow successfully, my 4-year-old body couldn't withstand the force of the blow, and I flew before gracefully skidding on the ground like a flat rock on a lake. Thankfully I reinforced my whole body before I took the blow, or I would have seriously gotten hurt. Groaning, I sat myself up and rubbed my throbbing head. I looked up, only to see 7 stupefied faces staring at me. My mother recovered first. Shaking her head, she rushed towards me and immediately mumbled a healing spell around my body. Out of the corner of my eye I spotted Durden thumping Adam's head with enough force to make him stumble forward. Art, honey, are you okay? How do you feel? I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry, Adam's voice cuts in. Haven't taught him how to fight, my ass. How the hell did you train this little monster? He groaned, still rubbing his head. I didn't teach him that, my father managed to mutter. He shook himself out of the stupor and came next to me to ask if I was okay. I just nodded my head. My father picked me up and gently lowered me back down where I was sitting before and squatted down in front of me so he was eye level. Art, where did you learn to fight like that? Deciding to feign ignorance, I said, putting on a nonchalant face. I learned by reading books and watching you, Dad. I don't think saying hey Dad. I was the king duelist representative of my country from a world where diplomatic and international issues are settled by battles. I just happened to be reincarnated as your son. Surprise would get a hearty reaction from him. Sorry for roughing you up there, little buddy. I didn't expect I would need to use that much strength to get you off me. Seeing Adam apologize gave me just a bit of a better impression of him. I guess he wasn't a total jerk. I heard a faint voice from my side. Your fighting style is unique. How did you do that? Step after the faint wow, 2 complete sentences. That was the longest string of words Jasmine said this entire trip by far. I feel so honored. Thank you, I responded. I reorganized my thoughts before trying to explain in steps what I did. It's a simple technique, really. Since I was fainting to Mr. Crench's right side, I placed my right foot forward as the last step before the feint. There I instantly focused my mana into the right foot, pushing myself back, and at the same time I bring my left leg behind right, aimed at an angle towards where I wanted to go, focusing mana into my left foot this time, but with more power than when I used mana on my right, so that I don't propel myself backwards instead of the direction I want to actually go to. That was a mouthful. I looked around to see Adam, Helen, and even my father head towards the clearing, trying to test out what I just explained. When I turned back to face Jasmine, I only saw her back as she rushed towards the clearing as well. Mother sat down next to me, patting my head with a gentle smile on her face that seemed to say, you did well. Angela came up to me too, burying my face, or rather my whole head, in her bosom, cheerfully exclaiming, cute and talented, aren't you? Why couldn't you have been born earlier so that this sister could snatch you up herself? Blushing, I willed myself away from those breasts that I suspected to have their own gravitational pull. Those weapons were dangerous. My guardian angel Durden was a lot calmer about all of this, and just gave me a thumbs up. He's so cool. The night passed as the 4 idiots spent most of the time trying to master the feint step while I slept in the tent with Mother. A couple of days passed as we finally managed to make it to the foot of the Grand Mountains, which by the way sure lived up to its name. Along the way only Helen managed to lay down her pride and ask me for some clarification on the feint step. I went over it slowly, explaining what the timing of the interval between the last right foot and the left foot should be. and how to properly balance the output of mana into both feet so you could go the way you're aiming. The whole time I could almost see the ears of the other three idiots getting bigger as they tried to suck in the information that I gave her, nodding while taking mental notes. The first one to succeed was Jasmine. She seemed like the cold genius type. I guess it was true. She pulled me aside one day, nearly blushing, while I was taking reading and writing lessons on the back of the carriage with Mother, and asked me to watch. We had to take a small stop so the carriages wouldn't leave us behind. After successfully demonstrating the faint step to me, I applauded, saying, "Amazing, you learned it so quickly. It's one of the most basic techniques I developed." But I wasn't going to tell her that. She responded curtly, saying it was nothing but the upward curvature of her lips, and the slight proud twitch of her nose showed otherwise. Haha, she's happy. By the time we had arrived at the foot of the Grand Mountains, all four of the idiots managed to learn the technique, changing it slightly to fit their own fighting style. The next step of the journey was ascending up the mountains. Luckily, there was a path around 2 carriages wide that circled around the mountain, eventually leading to the teleportation gate at the top. The front carriage included Durden holding the reins in the front with Father besides him to keep him company. This carriage held most of our luggage. Helen was currently seated on the top of the second carriage, the one I was riding in, scouting for any abnormalities. Angela sat in the back carriage with my mom and me, while Adam walked behind us keeping guard. While Jasmine steered the carriage, I kept noticing how she turned her head back and stared at me, almost making G sounds. Is she expecting me to show her other techniques or something? Every time I met her gaze, she quickly turned her head back to the front. Is she 5? Speaking of age, I turned 4 on the first leg of our journey to the foot of the Grand Mountains. I don't know when Mother prepared a cake or where she even put it, but I didn't complain, put on a big smile, and thanked her and everyone else while everyone gave me a hug or a pat on the back. Jasmine surprised me then when she handed me a short knife, simply declaring, "Present. She cares I'm tearing up." Fortunately, our journey up the mountain was rather uneventful. I spent a lot of my time reading my book on mana manipulation, trying to find more discrepancies between mana and ki. So far it seemed pretty similar, except that in rare cases an augmenter's mana usage could take on the property of elements. Reading on, I noticed that for beginners who were able to dabble in this, it wasn't as distinct as what you might see when conjurers casted spells, but more like the quality of each distinct element. For example, an augmenter, assuming he has an innate compatibility with fire, would have mana that showed an explosive quality when used. Water would naturally have a smooth, flexible quality. Earth would have a firm and rigid quality. Finally, wind would have the quality of a sharp blade. That's strange. Back in my old world, these kinds of qualities in ki had nothing to do with elements, but rather depended on how you utilized your ki. Shaping the ki into points and edges would give it the so-called wind element, while storing up your mana into a single point and bursting it at the last moment would give it the fire element, and so on. Sure, practitioners had preferences and were naturally better at practicing one style more than the other, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it was rare. Only the most basic use of ki involved reinforcing the body and weapons. I would have to test this with mana in the future. Being stuck in a 4-year-old body with constant supervision by suspicious adults made practicing really hard. I kept reading on when suddenly Helen's alarmed voice rang in my ears. "Bandits, prepare to engage," she shouted as a rumble of footsteps came from our right and rear. "Submit 0 wind, and follow my will I command, and gather you around in protection wind barrier." Instantly I feel a gust of wind forming a tornado around Mother Angela and I. Then the gust bent into a sphere around us. Angela was holding out her wand, concentrating on keeping the barrier active, while arrows constantly bombarded the barrier only to get redirected to a different direction. My mother pulled me in close, trying to shield me using her body from whatever might get through. Thankfully, her efforts didn't seem to be necessary, as the barrier held strong. In a matter of seconds, the tarp covering the carriage was torn to shreds and I get a better view of the situation at hand. We were completely surrounded. Just from what I could see, there were at least 30 bandits. Our current situation was unfavorable at best, as both our path forward and our retreat back were blocked off by bandits wielding swords, spears, and other close-ranged weapons. On the mountainside to our right there were archers positioned atop a cliff, their bows aimed at us, while only the steep edge of the mountain with the looming fog beckoned to our left. Jasmine, Durden, and my father seemed to be fine with no visible injuries, but Helen had an unhealthy pale complexion that seemed to be a result of the arrow jetting from her right calf. A bald man with multiple scars deforming his face, and a body of a bear carrying a giant battle axe spoke out, "Look what we have here. Pretty good catch, boys. Leave only the girls and the kid alive. Try not to scar them too much." Damaged goods will only sell for less, he snorted with a smirk that revealed a nearly toothless mouth. Damaged goods. I felt my body temperature rising, tensing from a smoldering anger I haven't felt towards someone in a while. Being sheltered in the bubble of my home had almost made me forget that any world has its own share of trash like him. I was ready to rush towards this brute, almost forgetting the fact that I was now in a 4-year-old's body, when my father yelled out, "There are only 4 mages. And none of them seem to be conjurers, the rest are normal warriors." Faint mana fluctuations around a person's body made mages distinguishable compared to normal humans, only apparent if studied closely as for whether they were an augmenter or conjurer, making an inference based on physical structure, and the weapon they were holding gave me a pretty solid idea. I could visibly see how quickly my father reverted back to his former adventurer days, when he had once led the twin horns, as his expression held the wisdom that could only come from experience. He donned his gauntlets, shouting safeguard formation. Adam quickly arrived behind us, as he faced the back of the road, spear pointed, while Jasmine and Helen came to our left with both of their weapons unsheathed. Facing ahead, my father and Durden faced the mountainside, positioning themselves to protect us from the archers overhead. Meanwhile, Angela maintained her position, preparing another spell, as she kept her wind barrier active. Gather and guard my allies, O benevolent earth, do not let them be harmed. The ground rumbled as a 4-meter earthen wall transmuted up from the ground, curving up in front of Durden. Using that moment, my father burst forward, raising his gauntlets in a guard position against the arrows towards the enemy archers. Moments later, Angela finished her spell and unleashed a torrent of wind blades aimed at the front and back of the path. That was apparently the cue, as Adam and Jasmine shadowed behind the wind spell, arriving in front of our distraught enemies that were covering their vitals against the flurry of blades. Helen remained, her arrow knocked and bow drawn, imbuing the tip with mana that shined in a faint blue light. It didn't take a genius to realize that this arrangement was ideal for protecting valuable goods or people, with 2 layers of protection from the conjurers and an archer mage ready to snipe anyone who managed to cross the assaults of Adam, Jasmine, and father into the defense line. It was a standard yet well thought out formation. "Warrior coming your way, Helen," Adam shouted as he dodged the swing of a mace, delivering a precise swipe to the jugular of the unfortunate bandit. His eyes widened as he dropped his weapon, desperately trying to seal the fatal wound with his trembling hands as blood spurted out through the gaps between his fingers. Mother was holding me firmly in her bosom as she tried to shield my eyes from the scenes of gore happening around us. Fortunately for me, she wasn't looking down at me, so she didn't realize that I could see fairly clearly. Meanwhile, a scruff middle-aged man wielding a machete lunged towards Angela, hoping to disrupt the spell. Although the wind blade spell didn't seem all too powerful, it provided a painful distraction that was keeping us on equal footing despite our lack in numbers. I tried to free myself to block the man before he got in range to attack Angela, but before I could pull myself away from my mother, it was already over. The fierce sound of the show came only after the arrow had done its job. Helen's shot had carried a force powerful enough to pierce through the armored chest of the machete-wielding bandit and lift him up and back a 6 meters, nailing him into the ground. I took a brief moment to take a mental note. Wise men ought not to piss off Helen. Helen's eyes narrowed as she knocked and drew another arrow. Focusing, I could faintly see the mana gathering into her right eye as she shut her left. Soon another reinforced arrow streaked through, followed by a sharp hiss, ignoring all opposing air resistance as it closed in on another enemy fighter. This man vaguely resembled a smaller Durden, except more muscular and more angular of a face, his brows furrowing in concentration. His giant sword, which was his height, had somehow reached the arrow in time, generating a sound of a bullet hitting metal. The enemy fighter slid back but wasn't harmed as he anchored his great sword into ground, using it to balance himself. However, before even had the chance to smirk in content, a second arrow pierced through his forehead. It was a grim sight, seeing the light drain from his eyes. Jasmine was engaged in an intense duel against an augmenter whose weapon was a long chain whip. It looked like Jasmine was at a disadvantage since the range of her 2 daggers was lacking. She was doing all she could to dodge the erratic movements of the whip. By now it was evident the enemy had realized how much she was struggling as he jeered while licking his lips. "I'll make sure to treat you real well before we sell you off as a slave, little missy. Don't worry, by the time I'm done training you, you'll be begging to stay with me," he hissed, followed by another lick of his lips. The very thought made me shudder, but at this point all I could do was clench my fists in frustration. Against a fighter I had a chance, against an adult augmenter I didn't have the confidence in winning. It pained me to stay in the protection of everyone while they risked their lives. I tried to come up with ways to help, but so far None came to mind. I could only grit my teeth and endure surveying the battle. I saw that the earth wall was holding strong, none of the arrows being able to penetrate through. Focusing on Durden, I watched his left hand that was directed towards the earth wall as he maintained a constant flow of mana to keep it from collapsing. He formed a narrow slit in the middle of the wall to gain vision on my father, and the archers scattering trying to run away. Take heed, Mother Earth, and answer my call. Pierce my enemies, let none of them live. Rupture spike. After a brief delay, a dozen spikes began shooting up from the ground at the bandit archers. While a few managed to dodge, many of the bandits were impaled, their screams only lasting a couple of moments before dying. Durden looked recognizably drained from that spell, his jaw clenched as beads of sweat ran down his pale face. It was at this moment that I noticed my mother had taken out a wand. Her trembling fingers were fumbling with it before she shook her head and stuffed it back into her robe. In the wand's stead, she held on to me tighter. There was no one from our side injured besides Helen, who had bound the wound on her calf. Fortunately, the arrow wasn't lodged in too deep thanks to Helen's mana reinforcement. By the time she wounded, the bleeding had stopped. But throughout this whole time my mother had a constant look of paranoia, her face pale with worry. I couldn't help but notice that her hand kept reaching for the wand in her robe until she decided to draw it back last minute. Her eyes never stayed fixed to one place, always turning left and right, trying to look out for anything that could harm us. While a little confused at first, I dismissed it mentally, concluding that since she wasn't an adventurer for too long, unlike my father, she was simply not used to situations like the battle was coming to its peak. The bandit group had not suspected that every one of our group members would be a capable mage. Because of that calculation error, all of the melee fighters were dead, the only ones alive being the 4 mages and a couple of scattered archers on the run. Jasmine was still having trouble with the perverted chain user, but the arrogance on his face was wiped clean by this time. With a couple of nicks and cuts on his body dripping blood, Adam was engaged with a dual sword augmenter. His fighting style reminded me of a snake with his flexible maneuvers and sudden attacks. He should be considered one of the rare elemental augmenters with a water attribute style, reinforcing the shaft of his spear to be flexible. His attacks were a mirage of quick thrusts and fluid swipes. The battle looked to be in his favor. The dual wielder had wounds that were profusely bleeding as he desperately tried to parry the onslaught of attacks. A thundering crash shifted my attention away from Adam's battle. My father had been knocked down against the debris of what was now left of the earth wall spell and was struggling to pick himself up as blood dribbled down from the side of his lips. Dead honey, I rushed out of the wind barrier, kneeling in front of father, my mother following immediately behind. I could see the panic written on her face as she nervously contemplated what she could do. I didn't know why she wasn't healing him, maybe because she was so startled, but just when I was about to suggest it, my father cut me off. Cough. Alice, listen to me, don't worry about me. If you use a healing spell right now, they'll realize what you are and try that much harder to capture you. They'll be willing to sacrifice a lot more if they know. He stressed his voice in a low whisper. After a brief trembling hesitation, my mother took out her wand and began chanting. I would have assumed that her stammered chanting was caused by seeing her husband injured, but for some reason it felt like she was almost afraid of using her magic. Father turned to me after giving up trying to persuade his wife. Art, listen carefully. After the healing spell activates, they're going to try to capture your mother at all costs. After I'm healed enough, I'm going to engage the leader and try to buy more time. I think I can beat him, but not if I have to worry about protecting you guys. Take your mother back down the road and don't stop, Adam. We'll open up a path for you. No, Dad, I'm staying with you. I can fight. You saw me. I can help. Consideration for being mature eluded me. It seemed like at this moment I was really acting like the 4-year-old I was on the outside, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to leave behind my family, whom I've grown to love, and friends who I bonded with so much this past week and a half. Listen to me, Arthur Lewin, father agonizingly roared. This was the first time hearing his voice like this, the kind of voice that one would only use for desperate measures. I know you can fight, that's why I'm entrusting your mother to you. Protect her and protect the baby inside her. I'll catch up to you after this is over. His words shook my mind like thunder. Protect her, and protect the baby inside her. Suddenly everything clicked. Why she was acting so paranoid, why she was clutching me and making sure nothing got even close to us, why both Durden and Angela were guarding us with defensive spells instead of just one of them. My mother was pregnant. I was planning on telling you when we arrived in Xyrus, but not finishing his sentence. Father just looked at me sheepishly, still pale from the blow he received from the bald axe-wielding boss. Okay, I'll protect Mom, attaboy. That's my son. My mother finished her chant at this time, and both she and my father glowed in a bright golden white light. Sinova, one of themes, a healer. Don't let her get away, the leader roared. I quickly grabbed my mother's arm with both hands and tugged at her to move while reinforcing myself with mana. We reached the area. Adam and the dual wielder were battling a dozen meters down the road. Art, hurry down, I got him. Adam barked as he kept his opponent at bay. The dual wielder was obviously frustrated by the inability to either reach me nor mother because of Adam. We hurried down the slope when I heard a faint sound to our left. Acting on instinct, I jumped up, bringing my wooden sword up and reinforcing my whole body and the sword to withstand the blow of the incoming arrow. A splintering crack resonated as the arrow met the wooden sword. Fortunately, the arrow wasn't reinforced with any mana, so even though the force pushed me back, I was able to regain balance mid-air by using the force of the shot by rotating my body and redirecting the arrow away. I landed on my feet a bit less impressively than I wanted to, throwing away what was left of my wooden sword. What the ugh was all I heard from the assailant before he was promptly impaled by an arrow fired by Helen. Go, she exclaimed, knocking in another arrow and firing it at the leader of the bandits to support my father. That was weird. Currently Jasmine, Adam, and my father along with Helen were each fighting a mage. Wasn't there for Damien? Forget the plan, don't let them live, the leader barked out. Who was he commanding? Respond to my call, and wash all to oblivion. A faint voice finished chanting water cannon from the mountainside. One of the scattered archers had his hands brought together, aimed at me and mother. We were tricked. He had camouflaged himself during the chaos. He wasn't an archer or even an augmenter, he was a conjurer. Shit, I didn't have much time to react as a huge sphere of pressurized water at least 3 meters in diameter shot towards us, increasing in size. As it neared, my mind raced, trying to come up with options. To my immediate right was my mother, and to my left were Adam and his opponent not far off, and behind me, of course, was the edge of the mountain. Even if I could dodge this, mother wouldn't be able to, and she'd be forced off the ledge of the mountain. What should I do? Damn it, I let out a roar unfit for a 4-year-old. Willing all of the remaining mana left in this cursed body, I tackled my mother, propelling both of us out of the way. I quickly realized my 40-pound body didn't carry enough momentum to push both of out of range of the water cannon. No choice. If I was going down, I was going to make sure to take that bastard down with me. I channeled mana into my arms and pushed my mother farther down out of range. In that moment, everything seemed to be moving in slow motion as my mother's eyes slowly widened in panic and disbelief. She might get a pretty bad bruise from the push, but minor bodily injuries were the least of my problems at that moment. If she didn't want to get hit with another spell, I had to get rid of this conjurer. Unsheathing the knife Jasmine gave me from my waist, I imbued it with mana. What I was trying to do I had only done with ki in my old world, never with mana. After willing mana into the knife, I threw it like a boomerang, aiming it at the conjurer, who was still concentrating on the water cannon. Barely curving around the edge of the giant cannonball of water, I heard the firm thud of the knife meeting skin. The mage let out a shrill howl of pain, followed by a string of curses indicated that the mage wasn't dead. Losing concentration, the mage's water cannon lost shape, but unfortunately there was still a surge of water strong enough to push me off the cliff. Time for Plan B. Plan B was just in case my initial throw couldn't kill him. I managed succeeding in the gamble of Plan B, and that was creating a thin string of mana attaching the knife currently engorged somewhere in the conjurer's body to my hand. I tugged back on the mana string just as the spell rammed against my body like a brick wall, knocking every ounce of air I had in my lungs and most likely breaking my ribs. Like a fish caught on the line, I could hear the mage's scream over the gushing tide of water as he was helplessly dragged down with me by the force of his own spell. Even as my vision began darkening, I was able to see the battle coming to an end. Father and Helen had just managed to kill the leader. Angela, providing Jasmine with backup, allowed them to put the whip user on his last stand. Meanwhile, I spotted Durden as he was desperately conjuring a spell in order to save me, but I knew it was too late. The spell had knocked me too far away. Still, I was comforted in the fact that everyone will be okay. Maybe the only thing I would regret being unable to see my baby sibling. With that, I felt the cold grip of sleep steal me away. Damn, I had always wanted to be an older brother. The blurred sight of a familiar setting made me blink a few times to reconfirm that what I was seeing wasn't a dream. From the looks of it, I seemed to be back in my old body. Getting up from the couch that I was sitting on, I left my room in the castle. A young maid who had been waiting for me just outside greeted me respectfully immediately on sight. Good morning, King Grey. I didn't even bother glancing towards her direction, walking as she followed a couple meters away, reaching the courtyard where All of the trainees were lined up with swords held in front of them. I turned my attention to the instructors yelling at them about proper stance and breathing. When one of them saw me, he immediately turned and gave a firm military salute, with the other instructors and trainees following suit. I simply motioned for them to continue. Before continuing, reaching my destination, I pushed open the double doors, arriving in front of an aged man with a head of thick white hair that matched his long beard and emerald eyes that shined with a sense of cunning wisdom and knowledge. He was the head of the council Marlorn. While I held the position of king, I couldn't help but consider myself as just a glorified soldier. The ones who actually governed the country, managing the politics and economy, was the council. So what came of my position as king? The title of king meant that I was actually more of a one-man army due to the decreasing numbers of children born and limited amount of resources. The councils of each country assembled, and after countless months of discussion and arguments came to the conclusion that if wars continued to exist, we would eventually wipe ourselves out. Getting rid of war would lead to two major outcomes: decrease in the death count leading to a population growth, and a decrease in destroyed harvestable land and resources from the result of nuclear arms. The solution that they came up with and enacted was to replace wars with a different form of combat. What replaced wars became known as the paragon duels. Whenever there was a dispute on a level that impacted the state of the country, a paragon duel would be declared, with each country sending in a representative that they deemed was the strongest. Looking up, Marlorn exclaimed with the standard fake picturesque smile that seemed to be an inborn trait amongst politicians, "King Grey, what brings you to my humble dwelling?" I'm retiring. Without even giving him the chance to react, I unclipped my badge, a piece of metal so sought after by every practitioner, and slammed it on his giant oakwood desk, walking out the door. What have I been living for all these years? I was an orphan who had been brought up in a camp designed to raise duelers. I was 28, yet I've never dated, never loved. I've spent my whole life until now solely for the sake of being the strongest. And for what? Admiration, money, glory. I had all of that, but never in a million years would I choose to have that over what I had in the town of Ashbur. I missed Alice, I missed Reynolds, I missed Durden, I missed Jasmine, I missed Helen, I missed Angela, I even missed Adam. Mother, father, cough, cough. I opened my eyes again with towering trees and dangling vines filling my vision as I lay on my back. However, this time the excruciating pain that I was welcomed by told me I wasn't dreaming. Where was I? How was I alive? I tried to getting up, but my body doesn't listen. The only thing I was able to manage was turn my head, and even that involved a series of throbbing pains in my neck. Looking to my right, I spotted my knapsack. I slowly turned my head to my left, gritting my teeth through the pain. My eyes widened at the sight, and I immediately had to resist the urge to vomit. To my left was what was left of the conjurer I had dragged down with me. A pool of blood surrounded the corpse, whose body probably had more broken bones than one still intact. I could see the white bones of his ribs jutting out of the sunken cavity of the chest, with a pile of his entrails beside him. His limbs were sprawled out at unnatural angles, with the mage's skull shattered in the back, with some brain matter oozing out along with blood. His face was frozen into an expression of surprise and disbelief, except for his completely red eyes, as a trail of dried blood was still visible from his eye sockets. I couldn't turn my head away fast enough, with my already weakened body being assaulted with both the gruesome sight and repugnant smell. I vomited what was left in my stomach until I was left gagging dry heaves. Even in my past life I had never come across such a badly mangled corpse, with the nauseating stench and insects feasting on the gore. I couldn't help but feel sick, with parts of my face and neck covered in my own regurgitation. I finally managed to turn my head to rid my sight of the mage's grotesque remains. How was I still alive? I couldn't help wondering what had happened while I was unconscious. Clearly the mage was alive up until the landing, so what happened to me I should look very similar to this corpse right about now, maybe even worse. But not only was I okay, I don't even seem to have a broken bone. I pondered over the possible answers until I was interrupted by a strong grumble from my stomach. Again I tried getting up, fighting through my body's protests. The only parts of my body that seemed to be listening to me as of now was my right arm and my neck. Up I willed mana into my right arm, and used my fingers to claw my way, dragging my body to reach my knapsack. It couldn't have been more than a meter away, but it took over what felt like an hour until I finally managed to reach it. Pulling it closer to me, I rummaged through it with my only able hand until I found what I was looking for, the dried berries, and nuts my mother had packed. I succeeded in pouring a mouthful of the snack that I brought only because of my mother's insistence. My throat, surprised by the sudden flood of food, responded by leaving me in a choking fit of coughs, leading me to another round of agony in my body. Fumbling for the water sack inside my knapsack, I slowly poured a bit of the water into my mouth, before placing another handful of the snack into my mouth, tears rolling down the sides of my face and into my ears. I continued chewing on the dried rations until passing out again, using my knapsack as a makeshift blanket. My eyes fluttered open as I stirred awake from the brisk bite of cold, looking around the position of the first rays of light peeking through the mountains. It was dawn this time. I was able to get up, but only with the help of mana. I carefully inspected all of my body, making sure everything was in place before allowing myself to relax. First things first, I made my way to the corpse of the mage, while trying to avoid looking at the heinous injuries that caused his demise. Spotting the knife I was looking for, I quickly jerked it out of his thigh. I wasn't sure how long I would have to be here, so having a weapon was critical. "Oh, you're awake." I instantly got into a fighting stance, gritting through the pain from the sudden movement with my knife in hand, turning to face the carcass. "I swear to God, if this corpse is the one that's talking," a melodic chuckle made me look around for the source of the voice. "Do not worry, you won't have to worry about that corpse." Reanimating, the voice that seemed to come out of nowhere had a dignified yet soft quality, emanating a sense of royalty. It was powerful and resonant, yet silky and soothing sound that made you want to trust it. Still on guard, I managed to mutter a less than elegant response. "Who are you? Are you the one that saved me?" "Yes, to your second question. As for the first, you will soon find out when you arrive at my dwelling." This voice seemed awfully sure that I would try and find it. As if reading my thoughts, she continued, "I am the only one that will be able to get you home from this place, so I advise you to make haste." That jerked some sense into me. That's right, I had to get back home. "Mother, father, the twin horns, my baby sibling, are they alright? Did they reach Cyrus safely?" If the voice could really take me back home, I had no choice but to find it. "Ahem, dear Mr. Voice, may I ask for the directions to your location so that you may bless me with your presence?" The voice let out another soft chuckle, before replying with, "Don't you think it's a little rude to call a lady Mr.? And yes, I'll show you the way." "Ah, so it was a lady." Immediately my vision shifted into a bird-eye view. Zooming out, a location that was roughly around a day's trip to the east came into sight and lighted up before my vision shifted back to normal. "I recommend departing immediately. It will be a lot safer traveling during the day than when it gets dark," gently chided the voice. "Yes, ma'am." I quickly picked up my knapsack before trotting towards my destination. It became less painful with each step, and by mid-morning I was only left with a few aches here and there. Whatever that lady did was some powerful magic. I've never heard or read of casting a spell with that much of a distance. Or maybe she left after casting the spell right before I landed. Then how could she have known that we were falling, and why did she only save me? The more I tried to solve the mystery, the more questions I seemed to end up with. Hearing a faint gurgling sound, I headed towards the direction. Spotting a narrow stream. "Yes," I exclaimed. I was absolutely filthy. My face and neck still had the stench of stomach acid, while my clothes were torn and caked with grime. Almost sprinting, I cannonballed into the stream, vigorously scrubbing clean my face and body, taking off my clothes, and after briefly washing them, I laid them down on a nearby rock to dry. After finishing the refreshing bath, I walked towards my still damp clothes when Kukuku, how pleasantly carefree! Reflexively, both my hands shot down to cover my precious area as I hunched my back, trying to make my body as small as possible. "Don't worry, there wasn't much to see." I shuddered as I almost felt the voice wink at me. How rude! My pride grumbling, I almost wanted to argue that my body wasn't developed, but I chose to ignore the voice and put on my clothes. "Ah, don't pout," I apologized. The voice stifled a laugh. "Calm your mind, Arthur. A king must be calm." After I put on my clothes, the perverted voice seemed to go silent. Not minding too much, I rummaged through my bag and dug out the last of my dried rations. Water wasn't going to be a problem for a while, since I had just refilled my water sack, but I would need food soon. Hopefully the voice would provide me with something. Looking around, I began wondering where I was. Since I fell off the mountain towards the east, I must be near the elves' domain. I don't think I'm in the forest of elves higher, because I'm not surrounded by fog. Was I in the beast glades? No. There weren't any mana beasts. I spotted a few rabbits and birds, but I've yet to see anything else. Something even stranger that I noticed a bit before was the abundance of mana in this place. It was mostly due to the richness of mana that I was able to recover from my initial state so quickly, although that still doesn't explain how I survived in the first place. I hoped that the source behind the voice would tell me. I should hurry aside from the fact that there was no road. It turned out to be a pretty uneventfully peaceful trip with minimal obstacles and terrains I had to go around. As I drew near the location of the voice, the density in mana was getting richer and thicker. Ignoring the temptation to stop and absorb the surrounding mana, I ventured on. Training wasn't important right now. I needed to get home. Since everyone probably assumed that I was dead, I couldn't help but worry about mother and father, not so much physically but for their mental health. I'm concerned mother and father wouldn't forgive themselves for my death. The only thought that comforted me was the fact that my mother was pregnant. Yes, at least for the sake of my unborn brother or sister, they'd stay strong. I reached the area where the voice directed me towards, but I was unable to see anything besides a cluster of rocks surrounded by a cluster of trees. I'm glad you were able to make it here safely, the voice echoed confidently, as if it already knew I would. Nice to meet you, ma'am. Mississippi rocks? I'm not a rock nor a cluster of them. There is a crevice between the back of the adjacent rocks. That's where I'll be, the voice chuckled. Looking around, I managed to spot the small gap about the width of an adult between two of the larger rocks that were leaning against each other. The slight breeze coming out from the crevice told me I had found what I was looking for. If it weren't for the voice directing me to this exact location, I would never have even noticed the small fissure. Child, go on and enter through the crevice, but strengthen yourself with mana before you do. I can finally meet mother and father soon. Without a second's hesitation, I slipped in through the gap easily while willing the mana to strengthen my body. I had expected a platform to step on, but instead I immediately plummeted down the dark hole. The voice had failed to warn me that I was going to be doing a vertical fall. I guess that was why she mentioned using mana to me, was the thought that ran through my head as I descended screaming at the top of my 4-year-old lungs, rubbing my butt. Groaning, I slowly supported myself up. We finally meet, child. I felt the blood drain from my face as my mouth gaped open and eyes bulged, feeling lightheaded. As my legs failed to support me, I crumbled back onto my aching butt, staring at the one who's been helping me this whole time. What are you? I managed to stammer out, despite having lived 2 lives. What my eyes saw, my brain refused to believe. A monster, for a lack of a better word, which easily towered over 10 meters high, was seated cross-legged on a crudely carved throne of jagged stone with an arm lazily supporting its head. With petrifying red eyes that gazed down at me while menacing, carried an oddly tranquil quality. 2 massive horns protruded out the sides of its head, arched down and around its skull, curving up to a point near the front, reminding me of something almost akin to a crown. It had a mouth with 2 fangs peeking out of its lips, and while its body was adorned in a sleek black armor that had neither decorations nor embellishments, it still glowed with the quality of a priceless treasure. Reiterating the fact that I was once a king, still this being that stood before me now made me embarrassed of even having the nerve to call myself one. No, the one sitting on that giant throne was a being that would make even the most unfaithful heretics bow down in submission, yet here it was in all of its glory, with its head resting on its arm, while its other hand nonchalantly scratched its nose. What I had failed to notice until now, though because of the dim lighting in the cave, and its body being completely black, was that this being had a gaping hole in the side of its chest, blood continuously oozing out. We finally meet, it repeated with a lazy half-smile that revealed a row of pointed teeth. I tried getting up but failed halfway and end up back on my butt, my face still slack from the shock of what my eyes were seeing. Bugs will fly into your mouth if you keep it open that wide. Great, at least it has a sense of humor. As for what I am, I won't say anything more than what you can see from looking, the horned humanoid monster said, with its eyes seeming to gaze straight through me. It is going to take a while for me to open a dimensional rift that will transport you to your house, so until then just be patient and wait here. There are special roots that grow here. You will be able to live off those until I finish its side. That's right. That's what I was here to do. I managed to regain a bit of my composure, and I stood up, walking a little closer to the being. Giving a courteous bow, I replied, thank you for everything you've done for me and what you will do. If there is any way I can repay you, I will do for you whatever is in my power. Such good manners for a child. Do not worry, I am expecting neither a favor nor your gratitude. I am simply doing this for my own amusement. Come sit here closer to me and keep me company. I haven't talked to anyone in a while. The being laughed, patting an area of its throne for me to sit on. I climbed up the platform rather awkwardly, forgetting to use mana to just jump up, and I propped myself on the throne next to the being. Excuse me for being rude, but you don't exactly look like a lady. How should I exactly address you? As I said, making eye contact with the being. You're right, I don't exactly look like a lady now, do I? I wonder why I said that my name is Sylvia, she replied, letting out a soft chuckle. This giant demon lord-like monster looked like anything but a Sylvia to me, but I chose to keep that to myself. Elder Sylvia, do you mind if I ask a few questions? Go ahead, young one, although I may not be able to answer everything. I immediately rattled off all of the questions that had been on my mind ever since waking up and after meeting Sylvia. Where is this place? Why were you here all alone? Where did you come from? Why do you have that huge wound? Why did you save me? She patiently waited for me to finish before replying. You must have had a lot on your mind. The first question is easy to answer. This place is a narrow zone that is between the Beast Glades and the Forest of Elshire. No one knows of this place because I've been warding off anyone who came close, although the cases are rare in the first place. You young child are the first to enter into this domain, she easily explained. Please call me Art. My name is Arthur Lewin, but everyone calls me Art. You can too, I blurted out before shutting my mouth with my hands, confused as to why I was acting like an excited child. Very well, child, I will call you Art. Her red eyes glazed, looking afar while answering my next questions. Continuing on to your second question. I am here alone simply because I have no one left to be with. While I do not think telling you everything would be wise, I will tell you that I have many enemies that desperately wish for something that I have. My last battle with my enemies left this wound. As for where I come from, very far away. Haha. There was a moment of pause before Sylvia continued on, this time her eyes looking straight at me, almost studying me. As for why I saved you, even I do not fully know the answer to that question. Perhaps I have been alone for far too long, and I simply wished to have someone to talk to. I first noticed you when your party was engaged in battle with the bandits. When you fell off the cliff to save your mother, I felt compelled to save you, thinking it was a waste for such a good child to die. You are very brave. It is rare for even an adult to be able to do that. I shook my head. I was scared too, and I didn't have much of an option. I just wanted to save my mother and my baby sibling inside her. I didn't know if it was from the gentle way she talked or because of how big and powerful she seems, but in front of her I seemed to turn into a child. No, I was a child in front of her. I see your mother was pregnant. You must miss them dearly. Rest assured your family and party are safe. As for where they have gone, my sight cannot reach far enough to tell anymore. A wave of relief washed over me as I had to do my utmost to keep tears from falling. I see they're safe. This new life brought about emotions I had thought never experienced in my previous life. Thank God they're alive, they're okay. I let out sniffles. Sylvia's giant hand reached down as she softly patted my head with a finger. The day passed by with me conversing with Sylvia, picking up some roots in between to eat that looked and tasted very similar to potatoes but were black in color. We talked about all sorts of things to pass the time as she prepared to open a portal. At one point she asked me how I was able to use mana so well at my age. I was under the impression that amongst humans the earliest mage to have awakened so far was the age of 10, and even then, because the child couldn't grasp how to use it, there was very little he could do with it. Yet not only have you already formed your mana core, but by the way you use your mana you seem to be more efficient than a lot of full-fledged mages. I just shrugged, feeling oddly proud by her compliment. My parents said I was a genius or something. I can read really well and I get what the pictures and words in the books are saying. A few more days trickled by as Sylvia continued preparing the portal. In a regretful tone she explained, one day the spell will take some time in order for it to be completely safe. I do not wish for you to land in a destination you are not familiar with. Even one inconsistency can lead to you being transported a couple hundred meters off the ground. Please be patient, you will be able to see your loved ones soon. I nodded and said that as long as I knew they're alive I was fine with waiting. It beat trying to climb back up the edge of the mountain these past couple of days. While I trained my mana core and chatted with Sylvia I noticed a few things. Sylvia really made me think of the Klitsch. Don't judge a book by its cover. Contrary her intimidating appearance, she was kind, gentle, patient, and warm. She reminded me of my mother in the way that they both scolded me while being tender when I did something wrong. I mentioned how the mage that I fought as well as the other bandits deserved worse deaths than they had when she suddenly flicked my forehead. Even though she was gentle, a flick of a finger from someone over 10 meters high was nothing to make light of. I was sent tumbling on the ground before angrily spouting, "What was that for?" Picking me up and setting me on her armored knee, she said in a soft but pained tone, "Art, perhaps you are not wrong in that those bandits did deserve death. Even I chose not to save that mage you fell with for the same reasons. However, do not let your heart be clouded with continuous thoughts of hatred and the sort. Continue on proudly with your life and gain the strength to protect your loved ones from harm." Along the way you will come to face situations like before, maybe even worse, but don't let the grief and rage corrode your heart, but move on and learn to better yourself from those experiences so it won't happen again. I blinked a bit, stunned by the fact that I was being lectured on morals by someone that looked like the epitome of evil herself. Strangely, it stuck to me as I just responded with a blank nod. Another thing I noticed was that her wound seemed to be getting bigger. At first I found it somewhat odd that she could still be alive with a gaping hole on the side of her chest, but I grew numb to it. That is, until a couple days ago I noticed the wound seemed to be bleeding more profusely. Sylvia tried to hide it at first with her hand, but it was growing more and more obvious. Noticing my concerned gaze towards the wound, Sylvia gave me a weak smile and said, "Do not worry, little one, this wound festers from time to time." One day, as I was meditating and using strict movement techniques to better control my mana, Sylvia suddenly interrupted. Try absorbing mana while you are making movements. Ideally, you should be able to absorb at least a fraction of the mana you would during meditation while you are fighting. Although you would be spending mana faster than you can absorb mana, you will be able to prolong the usage of your mana. That brought about memories of me thinking about this exact idea. I had forgotten about testing my hypothesis since I wasn't able to move as freely as I could now. I was used to having absorption of mana and the manipulation of mana as two separate things that I hadn't stopped to think about the possibilities in this new world. Let me try, I nodded. Humans have a very linear mindset in regards to mana and find it hard to deviate from anything that already works. Practice hard now though, because you can only acquire this skill while both your body and mana core are immature. Even mana beasts learn to do this naturally, but humans awaken much too late, and in most cases their bodies are not adept for this ability when they first awaken. Considering you are so young, there shouldn't be a problem if you practice, continued Sylvia with a proud puff of her nose. I had to admit that, like testing most theories, it was extremely difficult at first. It reminded me of the exercises my caretaker at the orphanage had showed us when I was younger, the ones where you tried to make each of your arms do something different except much harder. Practicing this essentially meant being able to fight proficiently while still maintaining a constant inward flow of mana. Sylvia's only advice was that, according to her, an exceptional mage must be able to split his thinking mind into multiple segments in order to process information at efficient speed. While I've never had a teacher tell me to split my mind, I tried doing as she said. Needless to say, I had never tripped over my own body so many times in this and my previous life combined. This at least seemed to get a few hearty chuckles of amusement out of Sylvia. 2 months had passed since then as I kept Sylvia company with stories of my family and the town I was born in, while continuing to improve in the technique thanks to Sylvia's patience and my diligence. Sylvia refused to tell me the name of this skill, so I named it myself: mana rotation. Over this period of time, it would be an understatement to say I've merely gotten close to Sylvia. She had treated me like her own blood grandson, and in response I've grown attached to this demon lord grandmother. It was because of our growing relationship that I wasn't able to simply ignore what was happening. It was frustratingly clear that her wound was growing worse as the portal responsible for taking me home was becoming more distinct. "Sylvia, please tell me what's happening to your wound. Why is it getting worse? It wasn't like this before. You saying it was only a fester every now and then was clearly a lie. This isn't going to go away on its own. It's actually getting worse." I frustratingly voiced my concern one especially bad night after she had vomited a pool of blood. I paused for a second, struck with realization. Why didn't I notice this before? She had been getting worse while creating the portal in order to send me home. She was sacrificing her life so I can meet my family. Sylvia let out a deep breath, knowing that I had realized what was going on. Managing a sheepish smile, Sylvia whispered, "Yes, I am dying, but I will get angry if you blame yourself thinking that you are causing this. I have been dying for quite a while now. You are doing me a favor by allowing me to leave this forsaken cave a bit faster." As soon as she finished speaking, a bright golden glow radiated out of her body. Shielding my eyes from going blind, I tried to focus on the shape forming from where Sylvia once sat. In place of the 10-meter titan-like figure was a dragon even larger. From her snout to the end of her tail, she was clad in a pearl-white coat of shimmering scales. Beneath her iridescent lavender eyes were glowing golden runes that marked her neck and ran down to spread around her body and tail like a sacred engravings. These markings reminded me of a very elegant, almost celestial tribal pattern branching out harmoniously and with purpose like carefully placed vines. The dragon's wings were pure white, adorned with white-bladed feathers so fine and sharp that they could put swords forged by master smiths to shame. The golden light enveloping the dragon dimmed until it fully replaced the once titan-shaped being. There now do I look a bit more like a Sylvia. Sylvia let out a toothy smirk. Sylvia, you're a dragon, I said. Now that I am in this form we do not have much time. Yes, I am something you humans refer to us as a dragon. The reason I am dying is because I had been inflicted with this wound after narrowly escaping from my captors. I had sensed one of them approaching dangerously close a few days ago, so I feel that my time of hiding is drawing to an end. This form will alert them of my location, which is why I only have time to explain what is necessary. I am giving you this to take care of from now on. One of her bladed wings unfolded and revealed a translucent rainbow-colored stone the size of 2 fists with a myriad of colors and shades. This stone resonated an aura that made me hesitate in holding it, as if I wasn't worthy. Without waiting for me to respond, she continued, everything will reveal itself when the time comes, so just hold on to this, and do not let anyone know that you have this. Most will not know what it is, but everyone will be attracted by the aura it emits. Sylvia then proceeded to pluck a feather from her wings with her claw and hand it to me. Wrap the stone in this to conceal it. After doing as told, the once divine radiant stone merely appeared to be a smooth white rock, pretty but ordinary. While I was studying the feather-encased stone, I was suddenly pushed back as Sylvia's snout gently brushed against my chest where my mana core was. Taken aback, I looked up to see Sylvia's purple eyes and the gold markings blaze brighter than they had when she first transformed. As the markings grew dimmer, and then disappeared, Sylvia pierced her tongue into my core, and wisped out a golden smoke that crackled in sparks of purple. A sharp yelp escaped my mouth as I blinked, confused and surprised. I continued to just stare at her, as she moved her head back, leaving a trail of blood from a hole in my worn-down shirt. My sternum had bled, but when I ran my hand through the area there was no wound. Sylvia's expression had grown visibly pained and weak. It was apparent even for a mighty dragon that was even bigger than her previous illusion. What caught my attention though was that her once shimmering purple irises were now just a dim yellow, with the beautiful runes that flowed across her face and body now gone. Before I had the chance to ask what she had done, a giant explosion interrupted me. I whipped my head up to see that the ceiling of the cave had been blown off, and what came into vision was a figure that reminded me of Sylvia's previous form. Clad in sleek black armor, and a blood-red cape that matched its eyes, the figure's pale gray skin matched the clouded sky in the background. The horns were different though, as this entity had 2 horns that curled down, and under its ears lining its chin. Sylvia immediately covered me with one of her wings in time to protect me from the falling debris and probably keep me hidden from our visitor. Lady Sylvia, I advise you to stop your stubbornness and hand it over. You've already caused us quite the trouble after hiding yourself. If you submit, the Lord may even heal your wound, the entity reasoned impatiently. Immediately after he had finished speaking, the world around me seemed to pause. Everything but Sylvia and myself. The colors of the world were as though it was being seen through an inverted lens. What surprised me the most was that everything was still. The entity, the clouds behind him, and even the falling debris of the ceiling. Ignoring the enemy, Sylvie casually peeked underneath her wing. I'll open the portal now. I didn't have the time to make it go directly to your home, but it should take you to a place with humans nearby. Do not let him see you and do not look back, she whispered, her eyes solemn. I ignored Sylvia's instructions after I heard what the entity had promised. Sylvia, is what he said true? If you turn yourself over, will you be able to live? Do not trust his honey-coated words. It will be worse off for you if you are found right now. As for me, I would rather die than go back to where he is, Sylvia said, impatience and anger mixed in her voice. No, I won't let you die here. If you refuse to go with him, then please just come with me, I begged. Unfortunately, I cannot go with you. Will forever be in danger if any one of them finds out you have had contact with me. I need to stay here. Sylvia gently wiped my cheeks with a claw, her draconic eyes lined with what I saw as tears. You asked me once why I chose to save you. The truth was to satisfy my own greed. I wanted to keep you as my own child, even for just a little bit. I intentionally prolonged the transportation spell because I wished to spend more time with you, but it seems I didn't even have the chance to finish it. I'm sorry, little Art, for my selfishness, but I have one last request to make. Can you be my grandson and call me grandmother just this once? And no, I don't care about all of that. I'll say it as much as you want if you come with me. Grandma, you can't not like this. Please, I'm begging you, just come with me. I don't know what you did, but everything is frozen right now. We can escape. Please, grandmother, don't go, not like this. I held on to Sylvia's claw desperately, trying to pull her away with me in my last moment with her. Sylvia's face blossomed into such a beautiful smile that I swear I thought I saw a human. I could barely make out the words she said before she pushed me into the portal. Thank you, my child. The trip through the dimensional rift invoked a very peculiar sensation. It felt as if I was trapped in the middle of a fast-forwarded movie scene. My surroundings were whizzing by in an indistinct blur of colors as I sat on my ass staring blankly off in the distance with no more tears left to cry. The ground I landed on cushioned my fall with a pile of leaves and vines. It didn't matter though, even if I landed on jagged rocks, I probably wouldn't have noticed. I remained in same seated position. I was enduring the trip, not even bothering to take in my surroundings. She was gone. I would never have the chance to see her again. Those two thoughts triggered another wave of emotions. As I heaved out dry sobs, I began recalling the near 4 months we had spent together, how caring she was, treating me like her own blood. I didn't care that she had prolonged sending me home so that I would stay with her through the short time I had been with Sylvia. She taught me so much and given me insight that I had been lacking since coming to this world. Succumbing to the faculty of my mind that desired sleep in order to cope with the pain, I curled up into a ball where I landed when a searing pain props me back up. The burning sensation spread from my mana core throughout my body until a voice echoed in my head. Ahem, testing, testing. Ah, good. Hello, Art. This is Sylvia. My heart fluttered as I instantly responded to the voice. Sylvia, I'm here. Can you hear? If you're listening to this right now, it means I have shown you what I actually am. It was some kind of recording that she had infused into me when she gouged that small hole into my mana core. You're nowhere near ready right now to know the whole truth. Knowing you, if I were to have told you who that figure in the sky had been, you would have brashly tried and fight. Little Art, you are barely past the age of 4. Upon looking at your mana core, I have realized that you have a rare talent, seeing that your mana core is already dark red in color. I will leave you with this. I have infused with you my unique will. This is something incomparable to a normal beast. Will, your future progress as a mage depends on how well you will be able to use my will that is embedded into your mana core. Was that why the purple in her eyes and golden patterns disappeared? The moment your mana core reaches a level past the white stage is when you will hear from me again. At that time I will explain everything, and what you do from there is your choice. There was a stage past white. Lastly, Art, I know you may be in grief, but remember that you have your family to look out for, and the stone I entrusted you with. My only wish is for you to embrace the joys and innocence of childhood. Train hard and make your parents, and I proud, do not go chasing after shadows in a fit of rage. Killing the ones that are responsible for my death will either bring me back to life nor make you feel better. There is a reason for everything, and I do not regret what has happened. With this, I bid you farewell for now. Remember, protect your family and the stone, study what I have left you, and enjoy this life. King Grey, that name and title was from my previous world. She had known the entire time. Did she discover something in my mana core? Was she able to look into my memories? So many questions, but the only one who could answer them was gone. I refused to move for a long time, staying in my cozy fetal position, deep in thought. Sylvia was right. She had said all of this knowing what my life back in my old world was like. I can't make the same mistake of living for the sake of solely pursuing strength. I wanted to be strong, but I also want to live my life without regret. I want to live a life that Sylvia would be proud of. I don't think she'd be happy, even if I reached whatever stage was after white, while living a life of only training. No, I needed to hurry and reach my family, but before that, where the hell was I? Looking around, trees that towered high over my head surrounded me. There was a dense fog that loomed thickly a couple centimeters off the ground, filling the air with nearly palpable moisture. Trees and an unnaturally thick fog. I sank back on my butt, crestfallen at what this could only mean. I was in the forest of Elshire. A disheartened sigh escaped from my mouth as I picked myself up. It seems like I won't be meeting my family anytime soon. It had been over 4 months since I had fallen off of the cliff. My family had most likely either gone back to Ashbur or had maybe even decided to stay in Xyrus. I didn't have any sort of provisions except for the clothes on my back and the strange stone that was wrapped in Sylvia's feather. This cursed fog limited my vision to about a few meters around me, while reinforcing my eyes with mana helped quite a bit. That didn't solve the even bigger problem of how to get out of this place. I reinforced my body, enabling mana rotation that had become second nature to me by now. Right now I could only absorb about roughly 20% of what I could do while just meditating, but I couldn't complain. The only downside to mana rotation was that it wasn't a replacement for strengthening your mana core. In order for me to purify my mana core and get it to the next stages, I need to solely focus on gathering mana from both my body and the surrounding atmosphere, and use that to get rid of the impurities little by little. One notable thing I felt was that after getting my mana core to dark red, the amount of mana I could store inside increased significantly. While the size doesn't increase, I'm guessing the purity allows more mana to be stored. I climbed a few branches up the nearest tree and situated myself. Once I got high enough, I focused mana into only my eyes, enhancing my vision even further. What I was looking for wasn't a way out, but more so for any signs of humans. Sylvia had said that I would be teleported close to humans, so I was hoping that there may be adventurers traveling through here that would direct me out, or even escort me. After about 10 minutes of searching, jumping from tree to tree, I found what I was looking for. I hopped a few more trees, feeling quite proud of my primate nimbleness. Stopping at a branch just a few meters away, hiding myself behind the thick trunk, I observed the group of humans. Something was off. I hid myself completely behind the trunk and closed my eyes, imbuing mana into my ears. And oh, help, someone please help, mommy, daddy. And oh, I'm scared, someone shut her up, she's going to attract attention. Thud, quick, put her in the back of the carriage. We're only a few days away from the mountain range, we'll be safer then. Don't relax and keep moving. Hey boss, how much do you reckon she'll sell for? Elf girls go for a lot, don't they? Hee, she's a child too, so a virgin at that. I bet she'll fetch us a lot of money. Huss, slave traders. I carefully took a peek to spot the small-sized carriage, enough to tightly cram in about 5 or 6 adults. I turned back around just in time to see a middle-aged man hauling a little girl into the back of the carriage. She looked to be around 6 or 7, with a silvery hue in her hair, and the trademark pointed ears that elves were known for. What should I do? How were they even able to kidnap one in the first place? The elves' higher forest's magical fog was supposed to disorient the senses of even the most capable mage. After a few more seconds of observing, I found my answer. Attached to leashes were mana beasts that looked like a mix between a deer and a dog, with antlers that branched out, looking like a complicated satellite. They were mentioned briefly in the encyclopedia I had always carried with me. The forest hounds were native to the forest of elves higher, and could navigate even better than the elves could. How those brutes acquired forest hounds, I had no idea, but I needed to think of a plan. Option 1, steal one of the forest hounds and have it lead me out of the forest. Option 2, kidnap the kidnapped elf girl to have her lead me out of the forest. Option 3, kill all of the slave traders and set the elf girl free, then take the forest hounds and have them lead me out of the forest. Pondering for a couple of minutes, I'm faced with a dilemma. Option 1 would be easiest, but it didn't sit right with me to just leave the elf girl, but then again, who knows, maybe she'll get bought by a kind old man who will free and take her back to her home. Fat chance. Option 2 had the obvious flaw that once I saved the elf, she wouldn't lead me out of the forest and just insist on going back home, and the slave traders probably wouldn't take it too kindly. Option 3 had the best outcome, but was by far the most pain in the butt, considering that there were 4 of them, and only one of me. Because of the fog, I couldn't sense if any of them were mages, but it was safe to assume that at least one of them would be. Being able to capture an elf in the forest meant that they were either very lucky or were professionals. After letting out another deep breath, I couldn't help but notice how often I sighed these days. Option 3, it was after hours of observation I had learned enough about them to make a move. I waited until nightfall to take my plan into action. Despite their rustic appearances, the slave traders were surprisingly vigilant. They never built a fire and always kept 2 people on guard at all times. After stirring up the forest hounds with a carefully thrown rock, I made my move. As soon as one of the 2 on guard went around to the other side of the carriage to quiet them, the one that stayed behind was sitting on a fallen log, fiddling with something in his hands, while the other 2 were sleeping inside the tent. Carefully jumping to a branch directly above the carriage, I prepared for my attack. My first target would be the one that had gone to quiet the forest hounds first. I dropped down with a quiet thud behind one of the slave traders. This man had a very lanky build, while lean muscles were visible. He didn't seem too strong, and was only armed with a long knife. Startled by the soft thud, Lanky turned around, probably expecting a curious weasel or rat. His face twisted into a mixture of surprise and amusement when he saw me, a 4-year-old child in ragged clothes. But before he had the chance to even speak, I lunged upward towards his neck. I infused mana into the blade of my hand, turning it into a sharp edge. This was called the swordless art in my old world, but here it would be more accurate to call it a wind attribute technique. He flinched back reflexively, his hands trying to reach where his face was to guard against the boy shooting towards him. It was too late. I take a quick swipe at the jugular, taking his vocal cord out along with his carotid artery. A stream of blood sprayed out of his neck immediately as I land behind him, supporting his lifeless body, and gently placing him down to avoid making noise. Just as expected, the forest hounds that had just been calmed down by the Lanky jolted back, awake at the stench of blood, causing them to howl and bark. Pinky can't even calm the hounds. What the I had already picked up Pinky's knife, and was waiting for him at the back corner of the carriage, while the other slave trader's attention was directed at the corpse of Pinky currently being eaten by the forest hounds. I jumped out from behind and stabbed the side of his neck with the knife. The hounds quieted down while devouring the two corpses as I headed towards the tent to dispose of the remaining two in their sleep. A shrill cry ruined my plans. Help mommy, someone, anyone please, son of a why. Now of all times. On cue I heard the rustle of the tent as the two slave traders that were left had come out. Pinky, Deuce, the kid is awake. What the hell are you guys? He barked, still half asleep. I swallowed down the inappropriate urge to laugh at the ridiculous names of the slave traders and hid myself behind a tree next to the carriage and infused mana into Pinky's knife. Sensing something was amiss, the two remaining slave traders carefully stepped around to the other side of the carriage, where their eyes bulged upon witnessing their two former companions being eaten by the forest hounds. Using this chance, I attacked the nearest one when his gaze whips back at me and instantly swings his short sword at my face. Dodging the slash, I dropped low and dashed toward him, trying to get in the range of my knife. I swung, reinforcing more mana into the knife, landing a clean wound through his right leg's Achilles heel. Guy, he let out a pained howl as he dives desperately out of my range before I could do any further damage. Danton, be careful, I think this Brad is a mage, the fighter whose tendon I just severed, cried. I turned my attention to Danton as he pulled out his sword from its sheath and lowered into a defensive stance. You see all sorts of crazy things these days. Looks like a huge sack of gold just showed itself in front of us. George the First bet he'll get us almost as much as the elf. He let out a crazed chuckle. These bastards didn't even care that I just killed their party members. Danton's body glowed faintly as he reinforced his body with mana as he advanced towards me, his lips curled into a confident grin on his square face. George was out of the fight with that crippled leg, but this augmenter was going to be trouble. The augmenter named Danton suddenly jumped above me, his right arm poised to throw a punch. I could only guess that his only reason for not using his sword was to not damage his goods. While I'd normally be offended in this case, overconfidence made it much easier for me, so I didn't complain. I jumped back in time to avoid the blow strong enough to leave a small dent in the ground. As I threw my knife at him, I used the same trick as I did with the conjurer I dragged down with me off the cliff, but this mage was a more careful. He disrupted the mana string with his sword and grabbed my knife with his free hand. Shit, I was in a bad position right now. Danton wasn't tall, but his reach was still a good amount longer than mine. He also had a sword which he now deemed it necessary to use that further increased his range. Wasting no time, Danton dashed toward me and threw back the knife that I had just launched at him. I easily dodged, but not in time to react for his next move as he swiped my ankle with his sheath. As I stumbled to regain balance, he used that chance to grab a hold of my ankle and flipped me upside down. His confident face crumpled as I punched the hand that was holding on to me. As I concentrated mana, I used a fire attribute technique, releasing all of the mana focused on my fist, and aimed for the weak joint of his wrist. A loud crack, followed by a howl of profanities, indicated the attack was enough. His broken wrist released my ankle and I landed awkwardly on my back. Quickly jumping up to my feet, I picked up Pinky's knife and used the chance to charge towards the wounded Danton. While he was still preoccupied by the pain from his wrist, he angrily cursed, "You're dead now, you piece of shit. I don't care if I can't sell you anymore." His left wrist was wounded, leaving a gap in his defense. I willed more mana into my feet and arrived in range, about to land a solid hit to his side when I see him furiously swinging his sword down. He fell for it. I quickly pivot with my left foot in place, spinning to my right, dodging the swing by a hair's breadth. I enter into my knife's range to his right side open. Because of his last desperate swing, he immediately tried to jump back, but I placed my right foot behind his leg, making him lose his balance. In one quick thrust, I jabbed my knife below his armpit through the gap between his ribs and into his lungs. He was easy to finish off after his breath was collapsing from the wound. I was now left with the immobile George the First. Couldn't use Danton's sword since it was too large and heavy for my body, so I made use of Pinky's knife one last time and swiped George's jugular. The poor fighter couldn't really contest or run away with his useless leg and died. With a look of disbelief, much like his two comrades fed to the hounds, it seemed that the elf girl knew that there was fighting going on. By eerie quiet, I climbed up onto the back of the carriage where she was locked, and I spotted her shivering in the corner with dirty rags minimally covering her privates. She studied me in surprise and doubt, her eyes almost saying, "He can have been the one who saved me, right?" I untied her as she remained silent, her swollen turquoise eyes never leaving my face. Tired and feeling gross, I helped her up and simply stated you should go back home now. She probably didn't know whether I was an enemy or friend until now, but once the word home was said a look of relief washed over her tense face, and she broke down. I was so scared they were going to sell me. I thought I was never going to see my family again. It had felt like a good hour before the little elf girl was finally able to settle down. I didn't blame her. Being forcibly kidnapped would cause trauma even for adults, even more so since she seemed to be only a bit older than I was. As sat next to her comforting her, I realized how bizarre of a scene this made. A 4-year-old boy tenderly patting the head of an elven girl in the back of a carriage as 4 bloody corpses were being devoured by beasts just next to them. What happened to those bad guys? She sniffled, her voice coming out a bit nasally. Not knowing if telling the 7-year-old about killing was appropriate, I simply dismissed it by telling her they ran into a very unfortunate accident. She studied the hesitant expression on my face with the raise of a brow only to look back down and whisper, serves them right. Looking closely at her now, I couldn't help but notice that she carried all of the necessary features that would allow her to blossom into quite the beauty later on in the future. With long gunmetal gray hair that I mistook for silver in the sunlight, the girl's disheveled state couldn't mask the innate beauty that she seemed to radiate from her pores. A pair of gleaming teal eyes shaped like perfectly rounded almonds quivered as her perky nose was so red from crying that it matched the color of her rosy lips, while all of her individual facial features seemed to be carefully molded gems on the fair creamy skin of her face that was the canvas. It brought her features into a surreal, almost phantasmal work of art. Of course, this was me just observing her from speculatively. As a gentleman and king who enjoyed beauty in the world, I wouldn't go as far to say I was checking her out. I helped her up to her feet before speaking again. Those people that tried to kidnap you aren't going to chase you anymore. That being said, do you think you can make it to your home by yourself? Instantly her eyes retracted in fear as a panicked expression spread throughout the rest of her face as tears welled up and both her hands clenched tightly to my shirt. Even an infant would be able to tell what her answer was through her actions. Look, I need to get home too. Aren't elves generally safe in this forest? I let out a sigh, trying to pry open her claws, fingers from my shirt. She violently shook her head, much like a dog drying itself, and rebutted, beasts only scared of adults. Parents warned me that children will get eaten by hounds or tree golems. I would normally be pretty amazed about something like a tree golem, but it was becoming pretty hard to find something that surprised me. After witnessing a demon king metamorph into a dragon, I rubbed the bridge of my nose, trying to come up with a solution for all of this. How long does it take to get to where you live from here? Still holding on to my shabby shirt, she looked down and admitted, I don't know. I held in the temptation to let out another sigh, since the poor girl looked like she was about to cry already, and agreed to take her back home. The kingdom of Elenwar was quite a long ways north, so my only hope was that there would be a teleportation gate there that could me back to somewhere, anywhere in Sapin. I instructed the elf girl to wait inside the carriage while I gathered some necessities, the main reason being I didn't want her to see the mangled carcasses of the slave traders. When even I found it hard to stomach finally finding a backpack small enough for me to wear without it dragging on the ground, I carefully folded and stuffed a small tent inside, along with a leather water bag and some dried rations. I picked up Pinky's knife from the ground where I fought Danton and George and strapped it to the front of my waist to balance the awkwardly large equipment on my back. Before heading back into the carriage, I freed the forest hounds after realizing that while they were able to pull a carriage, they weren't able to be ridden. I thought briefly about riding the carriage to the Elven Kingdom, but thought it was too dangerous, and we would stick out like sore thumbs in the forest. Let's head out now, I said, trying to sound more enthusiastic for her sake. She nodded, hopping out of the carriage as I led her away from the carriage where all of the dead bodies were. I learned a lot about the elf girl along the way. For one, her name was Tesha Erelith, and she had just turned 5, which meant that she was about a year older than I was, albeit physiologically. That is, Tesha was also a pretty reserved, if not shy girl. She was very polite to me considering that younger than she was, and never complained, making her a very agreeable traveling companion. Perhaps if I wasn't traveling in the opposite direction of my destination, I would have actually enjoyed having her with me. With the sun setting and the fog thickening, we pitched the tent underneath the sprouted roots of a particularly large tree for the night. I couldn't fit any of the supporting rods in the backpack, so used the long rope I brought with me instead and tied on 2 of the roots and hung tent canvas over it, weighing down the ends with moss-covered rocks. After I finished setting up the tent, I took out a couple of dried rations and handed some to her. Thank you very much. She gave a slight bow. You know, you don't have to be so polite to me. I am younger than you and I'd feel a lot more comfortable If you aren't so on edge, I replied, my cheeks full of dried food. Okay, I'll try. She let out a shy smile as she held back a chuckle. I began wondering if she had been raised by very strict parents. Maybe it was simply an elf custom, and by telling her to be more comfortable with me I was inadvertently inviting her to marry me. Giving her a shrug, I resumed, stuffing my face with more food. We sat underneath one of the roots of the tree next to our tent and continued chatting. Can you tell me about the human kingdom? She suddenly asked, her eyes sparkling in curiosity. What did you want to know? What is a human city like? How are humans? Is it true that all male humans are perverts and have more than one wife? I choked on the dried fruits I was chewing on, spraying them out before they got caught in my lungs. No, although it isn't against the law, only nobilities and the royal families tend to have multiple wives, I said after composing myself, wiping my mouth. I see now, her eyes seemed to say, still sparkling. Do you really? I go on explaining a bit about the town of Ashburn and my family to pass the time. Before I asked as well, what is it like living in Ellenware? She pondered a bit before finding the words to explain. I don't think it's too different from what you told me about where you grew up, except the children all have to go to school to learn about our history and how to read and write. When we awaken, we get mentors assigned to us, and we become their disciple. From there, a lot of it is just training with your master. I see, I mutter, pondering about the different education systems of the humans and elves. While the educational method of the elves were a lot more advanced and undiscriminating, it only worked because the elven kingdom was much smaller and tight-knit compared to the human kingdom. But it just went to show how culture made such a big difference in the future generations getting up from the ground. I held my hand out to help her get up. I noticed her hesitation when she turned a little red, but I assumed it was just my eyes playing with me in the dark. Sleep in the tent. I'll keep guard next to you outside. I see her thinking for a little as her eyes were fixed on me, full of resolve. I don't mind sharing the tent if you're okay with it. She tried to sound nonchalant, but her voice betrayed her. It's okay, I'm not that sleepy right now anyway, I replied a lot faster than I had meant to. Okay, she sulked. Did her ears just droop a little? Making sure she went inside the tent, I leaned against the massive tree trunk and began meditating. I started inspecting my mana core. Sylvia left me with something she calls her will, but how does that affect my mana core? Inspecting even closer, I notice ever so faintly some markings in my mana core. When Arthur Tesh's head poked out of the tent, is there something wrong? I asked, turning my head to face her. Well, you see, beasts will more likely appear if they notice you, because they will see that you are a child. Therefore, I propose that for our safety it would be better for you to come inside the tent. At this point, Tesha had covered her face with the tent's opening flap, peeking with only one eye. Tesha, are you scared to sleep by yourself in the tent? I chuckled. Absolutely not. I was just suggesting for both of our safety what the best choice would be. She insisted, leaning out, nearly tumbling out of the tent. If that's the case, then I'll hide up in the tree and continue to be on the lookout, you know. For our safety, I winked. She hid back herself inside the tent before muttering softly, I'm scared to sleep by myself. Smiling to myself, I opened the flap and crawled inside the tent. Caught by surprise, Tesha let out a small yelp before immediately lying down with her back to me. Seeing how red her ears were, I easily could see myself enjoying teasing the poor elf. After a few silent moments, she peeked over her shoulder. Can I hold onto your shirt? Seeing her trembling, I remembered that she was just a child. I couldn't imagine how hard it must have been for her, getting kidnapped, being separated from her family, and carried off, not knowing if she'll ever see them again. Scooting closer to her, I gave her head another soft pat as she turned her body and clutched the edge of my tattered shirt. Her eyes closed in content, and after a few minutes, I hear her breathing turn rhythmic. As I began drifting off to sleep too, still sitting up, my eyes fluttered open on its own, and it took a few seconds to remember where I was. I looked down to see Tesha's head on my lap, her body curled up comfortably, gently shaking her awake. I whispered, Tesha, we should head out now. She slowly stirred awake, but when she realized the position we were in, her body shot up with a surprised shriek. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Was I heavy? Don't worry about it. Let's fold up the tent, I replied with a wry smile, her cheeks slightly pink. She nodded in response, and we began packing everything up before resuming our journey. Few more days had passed by fairly uneventfully when out of nowhere I was struck with deep aches in my abdomen. The first pains occurred on the third day of the trip. We were inside the tent, Tess already fast asleep, when a sudden searing ache spread from my sternum. It disappeared soon enough, but even that brief moment caused a pain that left me in shivers. Besides that, the most exciting occurrence was when a couple of forest hounds tried to get close, but a throw of my mana-reinforced knife chased Them away nights passed as I continued sleeping in the tent with Tesha and her growing more comfortable around me, at least comfortable enough not to get embarrassed every time she woke up. Our conversations became more natural and had less awkward silence, as she began joking around with me, even teasing me about the way I talk. In her words, she said that I tried too hard to sound like an adult. Fortunately, my worries that the wave of pain might occur again when our pace wasn't impeded by any tree golems, or even stronger mana beasts looking for children to snack on. Can you tell how far we are from Ellenware now, Tesha? I asked. On a particularly clear morning on the 5th day of our journey. Her elongated ears twitched as she began surveying her surroundings. Suddenly she ran to a particularly crooked tree, and ran her fingers over the trunk. A few minutes of silence went by before she came visibly excited. That tree is one I used to come with my grandfather sometimes. I remember carving my name into the trunk of the tree when he wasn't looking. We're not too far anymore. I think that if we quicken our pace a little bit we'll be able to make it by tonight, she said, pointing to the tree. Sounds good, I answered, following behind her. As lovely as the journey had been, I needed to make my plans to somehow get home, and that wouldn't be possible until I got her home. Although I admit I'd probably miss her after this. Arthur, you said your family and the people close to you called you Art. I feel that through this journey I have gotten close enough to call you that as well. We were crossing a stream atop a moss-covered log bridge when she suddenly stopped. So can I call you Art as well? Tesha turned around, revealing a wide smile. Sure, I don't mind, I said, returning her smile. You don't mind? TCH, you could sound a bit more enthusiastic. She stuck her tongue out at me. I would be honored to be called Art by you, Your Highness. I made a bow, gracious enough for a noble despite my tattered clothes. Hee. And you may also have the honor to call me Tess, she giggled, curtsying back at me before turning back around and hopping off the log. We continued on the rest of the day with only a few quick stops to rest ourselves and replenish our stomachs. Constant use of mana rotation had kept my body from being strained, but it was obvious that Tess was growing more weary. After our last quick rest on a soft patch of moss we continued forward for the last stretch. Tess and I had gotten a lot closer on this journey. The once shy and reserved elf girl showed bright smiles that were contagious despite our less than comfortable conditions. She would continue teasing me too, saying that I should call her older sister since she was a whole year older than I was. I teased her back, imitating her when she was crying, rubbing my eyes and yelling, "Mommy, I'm scared." This turned her bright red. She smacked my arm before she started to pout, crossing her arms and lower lip protruding. She stomped off before yelling, "Meanie." It was dusk now, and the fog around us seemed to be getting thicker. My sense of direction was all but useless in this blasted forest, enough so that if I were to get separated from Tess I could wind up traveling in circles. Without even realizing it, she suddenly turned to me, her face a mixture of happiness and hesitation before she muttered, "We're here." Looking around, the only things visible were clusters of trees and fog. Confused, I was about to ask where we were, but I stopped myself when I saw Tess placing both her palms on a tree and muttering a chant. Suddenly the fog around us was sucked into the same tree, and what came into vision was a giant wooden door that seemed to be propped up by itself on the ground. Tess grabbed my hand and pulled me towards the door. When she opened it I was reminded of the portal that Sylvia had pushed me through. The experience didn't feel any better the second time, but I at least knew what to expect. As we softly landed on our feet, arriving at our destination, I immediately rummaged through my bag to make sure I still had the stones Sylvia entrusted me with. It was only after confirming that it was still there did I finally look up and take in the scene around us. Pristine, that was the word that popped into my head as I gawked at the elven city. It appeared we had directly teleported right past the gates. What I saw before me were buildings that seemed to be built out of a jade-like material. These jade buildings were so flawless and smooth that each seemed to be carved from a single huge stone. Making this place look even more awe-inspiring were the huge trees that intertwined with the buildings, filling this whole city with a more distinctive and organic ambience. Looking up, I see homes built on unnaturally thick branches extending out of the massive trunks, even larger than the buildings, with smoke drifting out of their chimneys. The entire ground inside this city was covered in a lush field of soft moss, with only the narrow sidewalks and the main road paved with smooth stone. The dense array of branches that fanned out from the trees covered most of the city in a canopy of shade, but there was a warm luminescent glow throughout the city thanks to numerous floating orbs of light situated in every corner and street. While I stood slack-jawed, still processing the world around me, a shadow whizzed in front of me, suddenly jolting me awake. Tess was still holding onto my hand when a group of what seemed like guards arrived out of nowhere. These elven warriors emanated a dignified air, all dressed in coordinated black suits with green trimmings and a golden shoulder guard on their left shoulder. These 5 guards all carried a rapier strapped to their waist. I mentally noted that these guards had no sensible aura. Radiating out of them, augmenters and conjurers both naturally emit a faint aura from their bodies. The fact I wasn't able to sense any mana leaking meant one of 2 things: their mana cores were at a high enough level where I wasn't able to sense it, or they had enough control over their mana to not let any leak out. Either way, it meant that these guys were as impressive as their attire made them look. The guards ignored my presence, as they suddenly kneeled in front of Tess. In unison we welcomed back the royal princess. My gaze flicked back and forth between the guards and Tess, and I'm reminded of the time when I jokingly called Tesha Your Highness. Tesha was actually the princess of this whole kingdom. When I tried to let go of Tesha's hand, she suddenly squeezed her hand tighter in a voice so cold and apathetic that I mistook her voice for someone else's. She said, "You may rise." They stood up, with their right fists still crossing their chest. When the knight in front speaks, "Princess, we arrived as soon as we saw that the royal teleportation gate had been used." The king and queen are. Before he could finish speaking, I heard a cry not too far away, "My baby Tesha, you're okay, oh my baby." Running towards us was a middle-aged man and woman. From the crown on the man's head and the tiara encircling the woman's forehead, I assumed that they were the king and queen. The king's tall-built body was uniformed in a loose decorated robe. His emerald eyes were pointed upwards and his thin lips were tensed, matching his short military-style hair. While the king had a dignified but somewhat reserved appearance, the queen was breathtaking. Although she was a bit past her youthful stage, her age couldn't mask the beauty that she was. Her round eyes shimmered a light blue hue, contrasting well with her lush pink-colored lips. Her silver hair was curled down, flailing past her back as she ran towards us, her well-proportioned figure visible underneath her dress. The mother's cheeks were lined with tears, as the father had a tense expression that looked like he was holding back tears as well. I turned my gaze to see Tesha's face visibly soften as she started tearing up as well. I let go of her hand and gently pushed her towards her parents, feeling a little sentimental myself. Tesha landed in the arms of her mother, who started sobbing at this point on their knees, both burying their face in their daughter's shoulders. The last to arrive was an old man well past his prime. His facial features are all sharp with a gaze that could kill someone on contact. His hair was pure white, and was tied in the back, face cleanly shaven. This elderly man didn't say anything, but his eyes did warm up a little when he saw Tesha. It took us several minutes for Tesha and her parents to settle down. In the meantime, the guards were glaring at me with daggers in their eyes, as even the elder was eyeing me curiously. The king finally stood up, and while his eyes were red, he still carried an air of dignity. As the king of Elenoir and the father of Tesha, I must apologize for this unsightly appearance of mine, and more importantly, I wish to thank you for escorting my daughter back home safely. He stated, his voice coming out a bit hoarse. "Please accompany us to our home so that you may rest after you can tell us what happened." His tone was gentle but implied that there wasn't really an option, so I simply nodded in consent. As I was about to follow behind them, Tesha came to me and grabbed my hand again, filling the surrounding people with expressions of shock. I couldn't help but chuckle uncomfortably as I scratched the side of my head, unable to muster up the appropriate words for a situation like this. After a strenuously awkward ride that seemed a lot longer than it actually had been, we arrived at the castle rather than a castle. However, it looked to be an enormous tree. This tree that probably needed at least a few hundred people locking arms to encircle it was made of a white stone that I could only guess had gone through a petrification process somehow. Stepping through the front doors of the tree, I was pleasantly surprised to see how impressive the interior of this castle was. There were 2 curved staircases that created a circle with a gigantic chandelier floating in the middle of it. This chandelier seemed to be made of the same orbs of light that were dotted throughout the city. I had told the king and queen that it wasn't necessary for me to rest, and would rather tell them as soon as we arrived, so that's what we did. Not even washing up. The welcoming crew was all situated around the rectangular dining table downstairs. Tesha's father was on the far end of the table with me directly opposite of him. Tesha's mother sat perpendicular to her husband, with Tesha seated right next to her. The grandpa was sitting across from the mother and daughter, leaving a pretty big gap between us, while the 5 guards stood off to the side behind the king, with both his elbows resting on the table, fingers intertwined. The king was the first to speak. "Child, what did you say your name was?" "Forgive me for the late introduction. My name is Arthur Lewin, and I come from a remote town in the kingdom of Sapane. Pleasure to make your acquaintance." King, queen, elder, and gentleman. I stood up and bowed slightly at each of them individually before sitting back down. Discussion wasn't going to progress if they were going to treat me like a child. Both the king and Queen and the guards in the back showed evident looks of surprise from my mature behavior, while even the grandpa had an amused smirk on his face, Tesha giving me a shy smile. Regaining composure, the king continued on. It seems you are much more mature than your age. Forgive me for assuming. My name is Aldrin Erelith, and this is my wife Muriel Erelith, and my father Virion Erelith. As for what happened, please tell us. We would like to hear your side of this. Waving off the apology, I began telling the story. I made sure to be very vague in telling them how I got inside the forest of Elshire. In the first place, I simply told them I had gotten separated from my family after running into bandits, only managing to survive out of luck. Inevitably, I had to tell them I was a mage. This was followed by another wave of looks of utter disbelief from everyone, including Tesha, because of the lack of obstacles we ran into on our journey back. I never really had the need to use mana, so I didn't bother explaining. One of the guards told me that I was a liar and to prove that I was actually a mage when unexpectedly Tesha's grandfather shut him down. He then clasped his hands together on the table and looked at me with a renewed eerie interest. I quickly moved on, telling them how I had spotted a carriage and observed them carrying a tied-up child into the back of a carriage, before going off. At this, the king slammed both of his hands on the table, his eyes narrowing into a menacing glare. I should have known it was humans. I corrected his mildly racist comment, and said they were slave traders, them and bandits alike prey on not just elves but humans as well. Speaking as a victim myself, this caused the king to shut his mouth before sitting back down, letting out a soft cough. I didn't ask Tessahem the princess this, but I am curious as to how slave traders even got their hands on the princess of this kingdom, I queried, almost calling Tesha by her nickname. I didn't think calling her something so informal as Tess would sit right with everyone present. At this, the king almost looked embarrassed before saying my wife and I had a bit of a disagreement with Tesha, and she decided to rebel by running away. We had decided to let her cool off a bit before fetching her back because we knew where she usually stayed when she pouted, but unfortunately she ran into some whose slave traders are. Runaway princess, I sneak in a small grin at Tess, and she responded by sticking out her tongue, face flushed. I glazed over the details of the fight with the slave traders. Luckily, I had caught the slave traders by surprise and managed to dispose of them before untying the princess and escorting her here, so a 4-year-old managed to luckily kill off 4 adults, one being an augmenter at that, and you simply wave it off like it's no big deal. Chimes in. The king's father seated across from Tesha, leaning back on the chair so only 2 of the legs are touching the ground. Yes, half of them were asleep and the 2 were simply not on guard, so disposing of them was not too challenging. I refuted back. The elder just responded with a lazy shrug of his shoulder. After finishing the events, I cleared my throat before asking what I came here for. As I have mentioned, it has been almost 2 months since I have seen my parents. I do not plan to intrude on your kingdom for long, as I wish to meet them quickly, so I was wondering if you guys had a teleportation gate that could take me to the city of Xyrus or anywhere inside Sapin. You're going to leave already? Artesha shot up from her seat, face stricken with panic. Both her mother and father gave each other a baffled look as they mouthed Art. The elder just shot snide grin at this and chuckled, rocking on his chair. I don't think it's appropriate for a human such as myself to be inside this kingdom for too long, princess. Besides, I wish to make sure that my family is safe and tell them I'm okay as well, I answered, giving a sheepish smile. The king responds back for Tesha. It has been a couple 100 years since the last human has stepped foot into the kingdom of Elenwar, and you, Arthur, are the first human to be in the capital of this kingdom, the city of Zestir. However, saving our daughter and taking the trouble to accompany her all the way back to us entitles you with a proper reward. I take a quick peek at Tesha and see her head down, her gunmetal silver hair covering her face. Unfortunately, the teleportation gate linked with the kingdom of Sapin opens only once every 7 years for the summit conference between the 3 races. Since the last summit was 2 years ago, it'll be another 5 years until the gate will function, the king continued. I couldn't help but let out a deep breath in disappointment. However, we are more than willing to send a group of guards to escort you back home. You are correct that it may not be wise to stay in this kingdom for too long. While some are tolerant, many hold animosity towards humans because of the war long ago. He flashed a brief sorrowful smile at this. I nodded in agreement. At least I'd be able to safely go back home for now. Please make yourself at home here. We will have your escorts prepared by tomorrow morning. I do advise you not to wander around outside in the city though, for the reasons mentioned earlier. The king snapped his finger, and an elderly elf lady in a tan-made uniform rushed out, leading me to my room. The room I was led to was large but elegantly simple in furnishings, while the only furniture consisted of a couch, tea table, bed, and dresser each looked to be handcrafted out of wood by seasoned craftsmen. As soon as I got into the room, I closed the door behind me, stripped, and went straight for the bathroom. The shower was a pleasant surprise. It was a simple waterfall that seemed to naturally flow from the ceiling and drain back out in the floor. However, the constant flow of water that didn't seem to ever turn off was a surprisingly pleasant temperature, just warm enough to relax my body and pores. As I finished dressing into a very silky robe just for your top and short pants, I placed the stones Sylvia left me inside the chest pocket inside my robe and once again tried to study my mana core. About 30 minutes in, and making only minimal progress, I hear a knock on my door. Opening the door, I'm greeted by a pouting Tesha who threw a light punch at my chest. "You dummy, why did you act all unfriendly when you were with my family back there?" she harumphed, slipping past me and sitting on my bed. "Well, first of all, you didn't mention to me that you happened to be the princess of this entire kingdom." Shaking my head, I gripped Tesha's hand and pulled her out of my room. "Kids or not, I didn't think her parents were going to like her being in a boy's room. Come on, show me around the castle. I won't get the chance to visit this place again." I immediately regretting saying this, I hear a slight sniffle as Tesha suddenly broke down into tears, trying to talk while sobbing. "Art, I don't want you to sniff. Leave. You're the first sniff person I've gotten ever close to." I just gently patted her head, while she was rubbing her eyes with the arm not holding onto my hand, as we continued walking in silence. Except for Tess' soft sniffles, we made it outside in the courtyard at the back of the castle. The floating orbs were giving off a dim luminescent glow, lighting up the well-kept garden in a gentle atmosphere. I couldn't help but imagine how differently this scene could have been played out if we were 10 years older. Before I even had the chance to finish my thought, a blatantly clear killing intent bombarded my senses. Milliseconds later, a faint glimmer gave off the position of a projectile aimed at Tesha. I pushed the still crying princess out of the way, and I prepared to parry the projectile with a mana-infused hand. At that instant, a figure in black was facing my back, his right arm in a stance to attack. Grabbing the projectile, I immediately spun myself to block the assassin with whatever was thrown at me. To my surprise, I was face to face with Tesha's grandfather. I jumped back out of range from before, angrily shouting, "What the hell? Why are you trying to kill us, kid? It may hurt a little, but I doubt that toy you're holding could kill anyone," he chuckled. I looked down at my hand to see a pencil-sized projectile with both ends blunted and coated in a layer of something close to rubber. I was tricked. Haha, nice reaction, nice reaction. I didn't think you'd catch my little present and use it to block my next attack. Truly marvelous. However, your usage of mana was mediocre at best. He proceeded to throw me a wooden sword fit for my size as he took out a wooden sword of his own just a bit bigger. Here I come, not even giving me the time to get in a stance or even the chance to accept his impromptu training. He dashed towards me, this crazy old bat. I lowered stance, and instead of being defensive, I launched myself at him as well, accelerating my speed to throw off the timing of his swing. Aiming for the fingers gripping his sword, I swung upward, reinforcing my entire body. Right before my sword came into contact with his hand, I was met with only air as he disappeared from my sight. Whipping my head back, I spotted him a couple meters apart from where I was standing. "You're a scary little brat, aren't you? Looks like I'll have to be a bit more serious." The grandpa smirked. His speed increased even more. Even with my previous life being a life of only training and battles, I was only barely able to keep him in my sight. However, being able to see him and being able to respond to his attacks are two different things. I felt like a sandbag as I could only curse at my own body. I was able to block one move of his out of every 3 he landed on my body. Screw technique, this old bat was messing with me through sheer speed. The only reason I was able to somewhat keep up was by using sword techniques and footwork to minimize my movement, along with the fact that because of my size, I was a small target. After about 10 long minutes of being treated like a wooden training post, I started noticing some patterns in the grandpa's attacks. As he flashed behind me about to do a horizontal sweep to my legs, I put all of my strength into my legs and leaped back with my sword tucked into my armpit, pointing at his head with a solid thud created from my blow landing. The old bat stumbled a little before gaining balance. Ha 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 ha, I guess I deserved that one, he laughed, rubbing his swollen forehead. Throughout all of this, Tesha was surprised at first, but after realizing it was just a spar, she settled down. She used this chance though to jump out and stomped towards the elder. "Grandpa, you hurt Art too much. You should have gone easier on him," pinching the elder's side. "That hurts, little one. Haha, I'm afraid if I went easier on Arthur, he'd be the one bullying me," he gently answered as he picked up his granddaughter. He flashed in front of me and suddenly places his right palm into my sternum. "Just as I thought, your body is in a dangerous state." I stared blankly at him, through constant use of mana rotation and meditation. My body should be a lot healthier than even the most well-fed 4-year-old. Virion, noticing my doubtful gaze, pressed his palm on my sternum at a certain angle, triggering a familiar searing pain. Your mana manipulation is good for a beginner despite your age, and your sword techniques and fighting experience are frightening enough to make me wonder what sort of life you had led to learn all of this. His eyes narrowed. But you failed to mention one critical thing in your story earlier. I could feel my heartbeat beginning to rise as I started to suspect that he found out about Sylvia. I've decided Arthur become my disciple. He nodded, throwing me entirely off guard. I just stared at him dumbfounded. What was this old bat saying? What, you can't be serious, right? I managed to blurt out. He just tilted his head in response. Why not? For one thing, I'm a human. Is it even allowed to have humans in this kingdom? Also, I need to make sure my family is okay and tell them I'm still alive. I refuted. At this, the grandpa went silent as he pondered a little bit before speaking again. Living here isn't a problem as long as you're under my name. As for your parents, Brad, is it an absolute necessity to meet them in person? It was my turn to ponder this time. I mean, I guess it isn't strictly a necessity for me to meet my parents in person, although I miss them. The most important thing is finding out how they're doing and letting them know that I'm fine if they are as well. I answered. Then come with me tomorrow morning. Be outside the manor by 6 in the morning sharp. Before he turned to leave, I stopped him. Wait, I don't get why you want me as your disciple. Also, you sound awfully hurried. Isn't it possible for me to go back home and spend a bit of time with my parents before coming back here to train under you? I want you to be my disciple because I see your potential, kid. An uncountable number of people have asked me to take them in as their disciple, from rich to poor, from young to old, but do you know how many I've taken in so far? None. These new generation brats bore me. Just because some of the wealthy noble brats' parents thought their kid was special, they thought they were qualified to ask me to be their mentor. I just furrowed my brows, not knowing where Tesh's grandpa is going with this. You're different. I know you have exceptional talent in mana manipulation, and only God knows how, but you possess better technique than even I. But that isn't the reason why I decided on teaching you, Brad. I need to ask you, how are you a beast tamer? Any sort of amusement that had been on his face previously was all but gone as his sharp facial feature emitted a deathly gaze. Beast tamer? What are you talking about? I was really confused. Although it was getting well into the night, and the elder had already sent Tesha into sleep, it didn't seem like this conversation was going to end soon. Let's go back inside and talk, he said, leading me to a living room with couches and a roaring fireplace. Sitting down on a couch, he continued, let's start from the beginning. I assume you know that mana beasts possess mana cores just like humans, elves, and dwarves, right? I nodded at this. Right, just like mana beasts, humans, elves, and dwarves possess qualities in their mana cores that are distinct to their own race. He picked up a piece of paper and began drawing a chart. Water, ice, plant, earth, gravity, magma, metal, fire, lightning, wind, sound. These are the 4 basic elements, and their higher forms. The higher forms, ice, metal, lightning, sound, can only be controlled by mages especially adept at a particular basic element, i.e. a deviant. This is where the distinct racial qualities lie. He wrote a brief description under each race. Humans, human mages, possess the ability to manipulate all 4 basic elements and are the only race capable of having deviants that can control the higher form of their adept element. They also have deviants that can even transcend the 4 basic elements, like healers, emitters, making their mana cores the most diverse. Elves, elven mages, can only manipulate water, wind, and earth, but with much higher affinity. We also have a special trait distinct to our race that allows very pure-blooded mages to control plants. However, elves don't have deviants that can manipulate water, wind, and earth into their higher forms. Dwarven mages can only manipulate earth and fire, but like elves, they possess a much higher affinity to those 2 elements. Their distinct trait lies in the fact that all dwarves are able to mold and bend metal, while some deviants possess the special ability to manipulate both earth and fire into magma, something even human deviants are not able to do, much less elves. However, they can only manipulate those 2 basic elements and, like elves, do not possess the ability to control the higher form of the basic elements. Wait, I'm not getting all of this. Why can't humans manipulate plants and magma? I asked while reading his handy info chart. Good question. Only elves can manipulate plant, which is the only form of nature that is alive. Because of our lineage being highly affinitive to the nurturing elements, only the dwarf race can manipulate magma and metal because, like us elves, their lineage makes them highly adept to the constructing elements. I started subconsciously rubbing the bridge of my nose as my brain whirled. Okay, I get the differences between the three races, but what does that have to do with me being a beast tamer? What does that even mean anyway? I'm getting to that, brat, he barked. Mana beasts are different from the three humanoid races because each species have their own special characteristics. Listing all of them would be endless, so I'll give you a simple example. Mages, adventurers or not, are classified EDCBAAA SSS class. This classification is the same for mana beasts as well. Take the Sonic Hawk, they are B-class beasts that possess incredible speed while in flight. They all have to affinity for wind and sound. These attributes are innate in their mana cores regardless of their affinity. If these mana cores are taken out and given to a human or elf mage that specialize in the wind element, their training will go by much faster than just cultivating mana from their surroundings. But that's it. I impatiently waited as Elder Virion gulped down a glass of water before continuing. However, when a mana beast reaches a class or higher, they have the ability to pass on their will, or ability to be more precise, to one person. I called you a beast tamer earlier because you have a mana beast's will in your mana core, and from my estimation not just any will but an S-class mana beast's will, if not an SS class will. I'm only able to sense this because I'm a beast tamer as well, although the beast's will that I tamed was an AA class beast, the Shadow Panther, so that's how he was able to be so unusually fast. Noticing the look of revelation on my face, Elder Virion just chuckled. Yes, Brad, I was able to bully you that badly by utilizing my Shadow Panther's will, but I only used around 50% of my speed. He shot me a wink. He was able to go even faster. Everything was beginning to make sense. The strange, faint markings that appeared on my mana core after Sylvia gouged through it, and how she said my future progress would depend on understanding her power. My eyes welled up with tears as I lowered my head, trying to keep my tears from falling. You must have been through a lot, child. I'm not going to push you for an answer, but the reason why it is urgent for me to guide you is because you don't have much time, he said in a warm but stern voice. What do you mean? I sniffled, looking up at him. The power from your mana core is too strong for your immature body to handle. Let me ask you this, boy, have you recently felt a burning pain coming from your mana core? The look on my face must have confirmed his suspicions because he nodded solemnly. If you don't learn to control your new mana core, it'll destroy your body. His eyes looked straight at me, dissolving any doubt I may have had. I understand. It seems I have no choice but to be under your guidance. However, I don't think I would be able to focus on training without making sure that my family is all right and that they know I'm safe too. You mentioned something about that earlier. I say, trying to put my emotions under control. Haha, just call me Grandpa from now on. My first disciple should at least be able to call me that. And who knows, maybe I'll become your grandpa-in-law. He shot me another wink. He chuckled as my eyes widened. In response, before continuing, we'll go see an old friend of mine tomorrow that'll take care of your worries. What I need from you starting now is your utmost diligence. Even I'm not sure how long it'll take for you to master the basics of your beasts. Well, in my 200 years of living, I've never seen such a young mage, let alone a beast tamer. At that, you're going to bring big changes into this world, Brad. I just know it. I just scratched my cheek. My cheek's hot from embarrassment. Go to sleep now, Brad. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. You'll need the rest. I got up and bowed before wishing him good night. Good night, Grandpa, he chuckled, waving me off, and I plopped into my bed, too tired to even get under the covers. I roused from my sleep grunting, feeling a heavy sensation weighing down on my body. Were they my worries, my burdens, the expectations placed on me? Are these weighing down on me even as I slept? Morning art. Wake up. I open my eyes and see that my burdens have taken the form of a lovely young lady, very similar in appearance to my friend Tess. Come on, sleepyhead, you need to meet Grandpa soon. Hey, don't go back to sleep. She bounced up and down, still straddled on top of me. Did she not know how indecent this may look to others? How the innocence of youth. I get it. I'm up. Tess, please get down from my stomach so I can get up, I groaned. Still half asleep. Hee Art, your hair looks funny. Hey, is it true you're going to be staying here for a while? Grandpa told me this morning. I'm so happy you're really staying. Right, Tess exclaimed with a wide smile pasted on her cute face. How the hell was she so energetic this early in the morning? Trying to tame my bed hair, I responded. We'll know for sure after my trip with Elder Virion. But most likely it seems I'll be bothering you for a bit longer, Princess. She stabbed my side with her finger. Not Princess Tess, I'm going to get upset if you don't treat me better. Damn it, she looks so cute with her pouting face. All right, I have to shower and get ready, so unless you want to see me naked, I think you should leave the room, Tess. I waggled my eyebrows lewdly. Eek, I'm leaving you, pervert. I could see her ears turn scarlet as she scurried out of the room. I didn't think that'd work so well. My 4-year-old body hasn't even matured any of its manly parts anyhow. I just shrugged and hopped into the shower to get ready, making sure to keep the feather-wrapped stone inside my robe. As I made my way down the flight of curved stairs, a butler opened the front door for me and I spotted a small carriage with Grandpa Virion and Tess inside. Father, it is not appropriate for a human to be residing within this kingdom. Alduin is right, Elder Virion, although saving Tesha is something I will forever be grateful for. Having a human stay here goes against all traditions. I heard the king and queen talking to Grandpa Virion as he is lazily leaned back inside the carriage. Screw traditions, I've taken a liking to that brat, and so has Tesha, haven't you, child? He snorted. Grandpa, it's not like that, he's just— her voice trailed off at the end, face glowing. Haha, anyways, he's going to be under my direct guidance from now on, so make sure to let everyone know that he is not to be trifled with. Father, enough. This is not up for discussion. Oh brat, you're here, come, we should hurry. His expression changed into a smile immediately after seeing me. I nodded and hopped into the carriage, avoiding the frowns that the king and queen were giving me. A little into the journey, I asked Grandpa Virion, hey Gramps, where are we headed anyway? You said we were meeting a friend of yours, right? Haha, Gramps, well, aren't you awfully comfortable with me now? Good. As for where we're going, it's a surprise. He threw in a wink. Tesha has fallen asleep with her head leaning against my shoulder. She must have been tired from waking up so early. Take good care of her, Art. She grew up in a very lonely environment, he quietly mutters. A look of compassion filled his eyes as he looked at his sleeping granddaughter. What do you mean? Growing up as the only princess of an entire kingdom is very stressful, too much for a child to handle. Growing up with no close friends, it was hard on her. She had gotten hurt too many times by people pretending to befriend her only to use her for their personal gains. This has made Tesha into someone cold and distant to those around her. Imagine how surprised we all were when we saw you two holding hands. He continues, yeah, I noticed when I heard her talk to the guards. I added, Arthur, Tesha has shown more expression, more smiles and laughs now than she ever had growing up around you. She finally seems more like a child. For that I thank you. He patted my other shoulder. This was the first time Grandpa Virion ever initiated physical contact with me besides sparring, which caught me by surprise. The carriage came to a gentle halt before the driver opened our carriage door to inform us of our arrival. Hey Tess, we're here, I whispered, gently nudging her. She eventually stirred awake, and we get out of the carriage, arriving at what could only be considered a dainty hut. Hey, you old witch, come out, Grandpa Virion suddenly yelled while knocking on the door. Suddenly the door flew open to reveal a hunched elderly lady with gray hair that seemed like it was struck by lightning and wrinkled eyes that were strangely a mixture of multiple colors, all blending together. Dressed in a simple brown robe, she peered down at me with a studying eye. Took you long enough to get here, she scowled. Ha. Arthur, let me introduce you to Rinia Darkasson. She's a very special deviant amongst us elves. Grandpa Virion announces, it's good seeing you again, Virion. Charming as always, little Tesha, she smiled, patting Tessa's head. Looking at me, she stuck out her hand. We finally meet, young Arthur. I am Rinia, a diviner. Grandpa Virion, Tesha, Rinia, and I were currently all situated around a circular table with a jar of water in the middle. Elder Rinia, you said that you were a diviner, correct? I'm a little lost as to what it is you can do. Gramps said that I'd be able to find out if my parents are okay by seeing you, I asked, staring curiously at the jar of water. Gramps, Virion, you've really let yourself go if you're letting youngsters like him call you that. She snickered. He's an exception. If any other brat dares to call me something like Gramps, I'll have them hung upside down and beaten with a cactus. He grinned back, looking at me, how painfully descriptive. Glaring at me, she barked, brat, you don't even know where your parents are, but you want to travel all over Sape and find them, and then come back to train. You'd be already dead by the time you make yourself back here. I looked at Grandpa Virion. Did he tell her? Almost as if he knew what I was thinking. He chuckled. I didn't tell Rinia any of this. There isn't much you can hide from her, but usually she doesn't bother looking into a person. What made you so nosy, Rinia? Gramps said, directing a worried gaze towards the elderly lady. You and I both know he's special, so special in fact that there are parts of his life that even I can't see. Arthur, whatever the beast that passed its will onto you is, it's not an ordinary beast. Limiting it to an SS class wouldn't give it justice. She pondered for a bit before continuing, enough about that though, Arthur, you're here to see your parents, so that's what I'll help you do. Close your eyes for a moment and picture your parents. Focus on their appearance and their mana signature. I'll take care of the rest. I closed my eyes and imagined the last scene I had of them both together, my father badly wounded and my mother healing him. Okay, you can open your eyes now. I looked at her to see the color of her eyes swirling. The water was floating out of the jar and was swirling around, forming a spiraling disc. Suddenly I see my parents in the water. The chair I was sitting on is flipped back as I bolted up, leaning as close to the table. I saw my mother and father together sitting around a dining table. It didn't seem to be our home in Ashburn. My mother's face was a bit paler, and was currently saying something to my father. I could see she's lost a bit of weight, but otherwise looked pretty healthy. Her stomach, it's pretty evident now that she was pregnant by the fairly noticeable bulge on her belly. My father looked the same. He's wearing some kind of uniform now though, and was sporting a beard. I could feel hot tears running uncontrollably down my face at this point, as I didn't dare peeling my eyes off of the image of my parents. They're alive, they're doing okay, they're fine, thank you, Elder Rinia, thank you truly for showing me this. I managed a sniffled stammer. She looked a little uncomfortable at my sincerity, and just waved it off. Let me see where they are now. The image zoomed out, and I could see the outside of where they're living. Just as I had suspected, it was definitely not our home in Ashburn. Zooming out even more, I could see the layout of the city that they're staying in. It seems like they've made their home in Xyrus. That makes things simpler for us, she says, a content look on her face. Tess, obviously worried about me crying, was patting my back, but her gaze didn't leave the swirling water. Art's parents, I faintly heard her mumble. Grandpa Virion clapped his hands together and stood up. Okay, Arthur, let's let your parents know that you're alive. According to Grandpa Virion's strict regulations, controlled communications between the Kingdom of Elenwar and Sapin. However, Rinia, being a diviner not discovered by the Kingdom of Sapin, allowed us a certain unregulated freedom. In a sense, how this process will work is that I will pour some of my innate mana into you, establishing a temporary link. When I give you the signal, start speaking as if you're talking to your parents. It's important to know that they will hear your voice inside their heads, so they may not believe what you're saying at first. Make sure to get them to believe that it really is you that's speaking to them, and that they're not going crazy. Remember, we're just doing this to let them know you're still alive. I'm going to emit your voice directly into both your parents' minds. I can't keep the connection up for long, so say what you need to within 2 minutes, she asserted, a serious gaze from her eyes. Nodding at this, I prepare myself as well. Begin now. Her whole body began glowing the same color as her eyes, and I could see the same glow spreading onto me as well. Taking a deep breath, I started talking. Hi Mom, hi Dad, it's me, your son Arthur. You're probably really surprised that you're hearing my voice inside your head. Well, there's a reason for that. Before that though, I want you to know that I'm alive and safe again. I'm alive and well, Mom, Dad. I managed to survive the fall off the cliff, and I'm currently living in the Kingdom of Elenwar with the elves. Please don't tell anyone else this. I don't have much time, so I'll only say the things most crucial. A friend of mine is a deviant like you, Mom, except she's a diviner, so I was able to see how you guys are doing just now as well. She is also the one that is allowing you guys to be able to hear my voice. I want to go back to you guys as soon as possible, but I can't right now. No, I'm safe and alive right now, but I have a sort of illness inside my body that I need to get rid of before I am able to go back. Don't worry, as long as I stay here and have the elves treat me, I'm 100% okay, so please don't worry. I don't know when I'll be able to talk to you guys like this again, but what's important is that I'm alive, and I know you guys are as well. Dad, Mom, both of you guys should be hearing my voice right now, so confirm it with each other. If you still can't believe this, remember, don't tell anyone where I am right now. Better yet, just keep it as if I was still dead. To make things simpler, it may take months or even years for me to be able to go back, but just be sure that I will be going back home. I love you guys so much, and I miss you. Stay safe, and Dad, make sure to keep Mom and my baby siblings safe. Mom, please make sure Dad doesn't get into trouble. Your son Art. I had trouble keeping my eyes open from the tears that continuously poured down. I simply stood silent, rubbing my eyes as I did all I could from breaking down. The glow faded around both of us, and Elder Rinia collapsed back into her chair, sweating and pale. Elder Rinia, I don't know how to thank you for this, I managed to croak out. Train well and continue to cherish those close to you, child. That's how you'll thank me. Also, don't forget to drop in once in a while. This grandma here gets lonely, she answered with a weak smile. I gave her a tight hug, making her almost jump. She eventually succumbed to my cuteness and hugged me in return before shooing all of us away. While we were walking out, I noticed Tess pouting a little, looking at my chest. By the time we had arrived back at the castle, it was already dark. A maid greeted us on arrival, but before I had the chance to go back into my room, I saw the king and queen. The king came up to me first. Arthur, I know you overheard what we were saying earlier today, and I apologize for that. Years of being a king has made me a bit old-fashioned, and I was unreasonably stubborn on you not belonging here. The queen continued for her husband, holding my hands in hers. You are now Elder Virion's first disciple. This gives you more than enough reason for all of us to accept you. Even if that fact didn't exist, you still saved our daughter. Please consider this place your home. I know you miss your parents dearly, but if I can be of any consolation, don't hesitate, and treat me as you would your own mother, she said, giving me a sincere smile. Papa, Mama, Tess says with her hands covering her mouth. She then ran up to them and hugged them both. I smiled back, thanking them as well. They were good people that were simply looking out for their kingdom. Smiling behind us, Grandpa Virion nodded at all of us in approval before exclaiming, "Brat, training starts tomorrow, so sleep early." I woke up from an immense pain covering my body. Cold sweat had already covered my body. As the feeling of my body burning intensifies, I clutched my body tight, trying to endure, when the door suddenly swings open and Grandpa Virion runs towards me. It's getting worse. He placed both hands on my sternum where my mana core is located before starting to emit his own mana into me. Slowly the pain subsided, and I was left panting, my clothes drenched in sweat. "Thank you," I managed to wheeze out without looking up. He replied, "It's a bit early, but let's start training now." Looking out the window, I noticed that the sun had yet to even rise. I probably wasn't going to be able to fall asleep again, so I nodded and followed him out into the courtyard. Sitting cross-legged, he took a long look at me before explaining, "Until now you've been purifying your mana core and manipulating your mana using your mana channels. While for normal mages this method is sufficient, for beast tamers we can't rely on this approach. Instead we do something called assimilation." I sat down facing him. My face must have tipped him off that I had no idea what he was talking about. "Haha, don't worry, you'll know soon enough what it essentially is integrating the mana from your core directly into your body's bones and muscles, hence the method assimilation. Unfortunately, throughout the period of assimilating, your mana core won't develop at all, but that isn't the point of this. Once the mana from your new core is absorbed throughout your body, you'll be able to start utilizing whatever power your beasts will have. So this is what Sylvia meant throughout this whole journey through the forest of Elshire and meeting the royal family and Grandpa Virion. I couldn't help but think that Sylvia had somehow planned all of this out. Slowly release the mana out of your core and don't be tempted to use your mana channels. Instead, let it seep out into your body and slowly have all of your muscles and bones absorb the mana. This will take time and effort, but throughout this process your mana core should reject your body less and less, Virion instructed. There isn't much I can help you with for the first part of your training except making sure your mana is distributed evenly throughout your body and relieving you when your body spasms like earlier. Training continued on with me meditating, dispersing the mana out of my core and into my body. I had gotten the hang of it after a few days, but I realized how long of a journey this would be. Directing my mana to form a core when I was an infant took a couple of years, but this was doing the exact opposite except with more mana and an extra step further of assimilating the mana directly into the muscles and bones. I didn't leave the castle during this time because I wouldn't know when my body would act up again. I was really grateful for Grandpa Virion for sticking by me throughout this time. Unfortunately for Tess, this left her very little time to play with me. The times I wasn't meditating, I was resting in my room, my body aching from being imbued with mana. However, that didn't stop her from simply barging and chattering on about her day. After several weeks of assimilation, my body acted up less frequently, and I was allowed to go out into the city. So after promising Tess that I'd go touring around the city of Zestia, I went to sleep. Waiting outside my room was an adorably dressed Tess. She was wearing a white sleeveless sundress and a white sheer cardigan over it. The light pink-colored sun hat she wore over her head was decorated with a pale flower, giving her a very fresh and doll-like appearance. "Took you long enough, hurry, let's hurry." She grabbed my hand, half dragging me as I fought my aching body to keep up with her pace. Seeing the city once again didn't distill the amazement I had when I had first arrived at Zestir. As we got off the carriage and start walking, we took time to visit the numerous stalls and stores that the city had to offer. While the two of us were met with a lot stares from the fact that a human child is holding hands with their kingdom's only princess, it was a feeling I was used to since my previous life, so it didn't bother me. What bothered me, however, was that while most of these gazes only held curiosity, some stares were filled with blatant hostility. Coming out of the armor shop, I had just moved out of the way for someone when an elven child bumps my shoulder. "Well, if it isn't the human brat that Elder Virion has taken under, I've heard all about you. Gross, I got human germs on my clothes," he snidely remarked, a look of disgust pasted on his face. It is fairly obvious by the clothes of this child, who couldn't be much older than Tess, and the attendants along with the group of friends following behind him, that he was a noble. After spending so much time with Tess, I had almost forgotten how immature children were. I couldn't help but think that whether they were an elf or a human, spoiled nobles always seemed to act as if they'd been taught out of the same manual. He then turned to face Tess, his facing transforming into a well-practiced smile as he offered her his hand. "Princess, it is below your level to be with this human brat. Allow me to escort you around," he urged, expecting Tess to receive his hand. Not even looking in his direction, Tess linked her arm with mine and coldly retorted, "Art, let's go. There is a bug in that direction, and I don't want to accidentally step on it with my new shoes." As I was pulled away, I glanced back, shooting the noble kid a look of pity which seemed to infuriate him even more. "Hold it, brat, I'm not done with you," he shouted, running up to me and gripping my shoulder. "I heard you're pretty talented for a human mage. Around here I happen to be a pretty well-known genius myself. My mana core has already reached red stage, and aside from water manipulation, my mother said that I'll soon even be able to manipulate plants." I responded with my most sincere yet blatantly sarcastic expression of surprise and worship. "Oh my word, Princess Tesha, it seems we are in the presence of pure genius here. I am not worthy." Tess let out a giggle, not even bothering to hide her amusement. "I'll be sure to give you proper respect, Lord Genius of the Elves, so if you'll excuse us." As I started leading Tess away, a handkerchief flew past us, landing on the ground. Turning back, I see the noble brat's face red as a tomato, glaring at me as the attendants and friends all let out quiet gasps. "How dare you initiate a duel with the disciple of Elder Virion? You may be of noble blood, Faerith, but you should still know your place. Take it back," Tesha ordered, her eyes narrowed in a glare. "I'm sorry, Princess, but my father has taught me never to let my pride be stomped." "Arthur, ready yourself for a duel, or retreat with your tail between your legs, knowing that your actions reflect your mentor as well. The choice is yours." Faerith puffed his chest, withdrawing a wand from under his cape. Some of the people nearby had overheard, and had already started to gather around us. Tesha looked uncertain about all of this, but just nodded my head and took a few steps away from us. I didn't want to cause a scene since I was a visitor, but after weeks of stifling meditation, my body was actually eager for the chance to fight. "Princess, please do the honor of initiating the duel," the noble brat said as he began polishing his black wand with his sleeve. I could see Tess rolling her eyes as she took another step back. "Let the duel commence." While my mana core was still in the early stages of dark red, I could feel mana strengthening every fiber of muscle I flexed as I dashed towards Faerith. It was over in a second. He was too cocky and didn't even take the necessary precautions to find out whether I was an augmenter or conjurer, and by the time I was in arm's length he hadn't even begun his chant. As my palm sank into his gut, all he managed to let out was a sharp breath of air being forced out of his lungs before flying back tumbling on the floor. I was glad that I had used my palm, because as soon as my hand made contact I felt a sturdy chain mail underneath his clothes. Faerith's attendants and friends' eyes grew wide as Tesha quickly ran to me and pulled me away. Later, Tesha explained to me that in a duel there were certain unsaid customs. One of these customs was to let the challenger make the first move. The other was that informal duels between nobles were only a demonstration of magic, not actual fighting. This got a good laugh out of Gramps when he found out, saying that the duels between nobles were utter foolishness and a completely inaccurate way to measure someone's magical prowess. All in all, what Faerith had meant when he initiated the duel was to simply take turns showing off each other's respective magic talent. It was disappointing to realize that the look of shock from everyone around us wasn't from my fighting prowess, but from the fact that I ignored the customs of the duel. Since then I chose to stay in the manor most of the days, keeping myself out of trouble as I lived a rigorous lifestyle that followed consisted of meditating with Grandpa Virion in the morning, spending a little time with Tesha in the afternoon, and training by myself at night. During this time I've sent messages to my parents every once in a while to let them know I was still alive, and that I missed them dearly. Like this, 3 years had passed. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.